The last hoop. This morning, questions and doubts are buzzing around my head like hungry mosquitoes. What will Caballo do to me if he catches me? What if Angelita doesn't come with me? I feel lonely and scared just thinking about leaving. What if I get lost? Maybe this is a crazy idea, but then one little thought lights up the dark edges of the others. This might be a crazy idea, but it's my idea. My brothers are not here to tell me I can't do it, or that I should do it in some other way. The alarm clock goes off. It's time to go. I land soft as a feather and then reach under the bottom bunk. The bag Angelita packed for me is right where it should be. Inside I find 2 short lengths of chain, 2 combination locks, and the screwdriver. I can still back out if I have to, but Angelita is probably up already. I push the screen open and then shove my suitcase out the window. I sneak up to Caballo, snoring in his bottom bunk. His feet are poking through the metal brackets at the end of his bed. He looks even bigger lying down. I put the bag under his bed and check my watch again. 30 seconds to go. My hands are shaking as I take out the screwdriver. Leaning over Caballo, I carefully open up 8 more of the rings that hold up the top bunk. Now there are only 4 thin loops of metal left, 1 in the middle of each side. Surely not enough to hold up the hefty Ernesto mumbling in his sleep right above Caballo. There's still time to crawl back into bed. Forget the whole thing. No one has seen me yet, and the metal rings are still holding. When Ernesto's alarm goes off, it startles me, and I drop my screwdriver. I dive and catch it before it hits the ground. Then I roll under Caballo's bunk as the lump above me starts to move. Caballo yells, "Ernesto, time to get up." Ernesto's not moving. He must be deep in a dream. The metal frame shakes when Caballo kicks the underside of his bunk. Ernesto whimpers. Caballo kicks him harder. Then I hear the screech of metal grating on metal, followed by a titanic thump as Ernesto and his bed crash down on top of Caballo. Caballo screams, "Mama!" and I'm almost crushed by the falling mattress. My arms are pinned to my side and I can't reach the chains. I didn't think of this, but I can't give up now. I squirm and manage to free my hands. I wrap the chain around the frames of Ernesto and Caballo's bunk and pull it to the other side and padlock it. Then I have to squeeze and twist myself around to reach the bottom of the frame to padlock that end. When I finish, Caballo is trapped in a metal cage made of the frames chained together. I can feel him struggling above me and yelling for Ernesto to get off. A laughing, jeering crowd is gathering around him as I crawl out from under his bunk and start to walk away. I know I should just slip away, but I can't resist. I walk back, lean over Caballo and look him in the eyes. Now we're even. Caballo stops thrashing around. He's lying perfectly still as I run to the door. "Stop him!" he bellows. Before I step outside, I grab the hanging clipboard with his list. The driver is trying to see what's going on inside the dormitory, so he doesn't see me adding my name to the list. As Angelita walks by with my suitcase, I add her name to the list as well. Then I run to the doorway to hurry the other kids into the car. "Caballo's kind of tied up right now," I say to the driver, waving the clipboard at him. "What's all the fuss about?" he asks. "Someone fell out of their bunk, that's all," I say, and then push the clipboard in front of his face. "Here's the list. We're all here." The driver is slowly pronouncing each syllable as he reads the first name on the list. I have to do something or we're not going to make it. I stand on my tiptoes and read the rest of the names out as Angelita pushes the kids into the car. "Looks like we have a full load today," I say. The driver looks a little annoyed. I smile at him. "Just trying to be helpful. Don't you have another run to the airport right after this one? That's a lot of driving to do." The driver checks his watch. "See, we better get going." Alone in Miami. "So those big Americanos, they stuck him into the dryer." The driver chuckles. "They kept pumping in dimes just to watch him tumble around." All the way into the city, he's been telling stories about the children who were not careful on their visit to Miami. As he parks the car, the driver raises one bushy eyebrow. "Remember, stay together. And stay away from the laundromats." "Some gringos have a strange sense of humor," he laughs. Angelita and I are standing at the back of the group in front of a Cuban coffee shop the size of a walk-in closet. The smell of the coffee is making me homesick. I want everybody back by 4, ¿me entienden? The driver yells and then downs a thimble-sized paper cup of black coffee. As the group starts to drift away, I snatch my suitcase out of the back and we hurry off in the opposite direction. I think he was trying to scare us, don't you? I ask Angelita. I believe him, she answers, and takes a piece of paper out of her back pocket. What's that? I ask as she carefully unfolds the paper. The map, she says, and runs her finger over the blue line that ends in an X on a river next to a highway. She looks around and then without hesitation points down the street. This way, she says, and then folds up the map. As we walk, Angelita repeats the name of each street over and over. Angelita, what are you doing? Memorizing the names so we don't get lost. We walk into a busy street crowded with men in suits rushing from one building to the other. In a department store window, a family of naked mannequins waits for someone to come and dress them. Tourists in flowered shirts sift through a parade of colorful bicycles spilling out of a shop onto the sidewalk. We linger for a moment, savoring the smell of new paint and running our fingers through the soft foxtails hanging from the handlebars. Construction workers in yellow helmets swarm in and out of a building, wheezing clouds of white dust. A crane dances a metal beam to 3 men high up on the rising steel frame. They grab the swinging beam, nudge it into place, and then bolt it into the Tinker Toy frame. If I listen and look just right, the growl of engines, beeping of the horns, and the tack-tack of the jackhammers turn into music. Then the men in their yellow hats almost look like they're dancing to the beat of the song. But the music here is louder, harsher than the music of Havana. There you could hear conversations breathing out of cool entryways, caged birds singing on a balcony, and the muffled clack-clack of someone mopping the floor inside. Here, there are no voices or songbirds, just the crunch and the grind of machines. We've been walking for hours and Angelita is still reading the street signs. Every block, every name she calls out, takes us further away from the camp. Not just the kids, the bunk beds, and the metal buildings, but everything that was connected to it, like my brothers, parents, and my home. Every other block I think about what would happen if I went back, but then I remember Caballo's face pressed between the bed springs, his angry eyes. I'm scared and excited at the same time. Angelita checks her map and then announces, Pirate Angels. She points at the sign blinking red in broad daylight. This must be where Tomas gets his free sugar, she says. The pirate girl on the sign looks just like you, I say earnestly. Angelita punches me in the arm. Does not. She's a lot older. We walk in and climb up on 2 red stools. Angelita takes off her cap. That feels much better, she says, and shakes out her shiny black hair. A waitress in a red headscarf and white pirate's blouse puts her placemat down in front of us and pulls a pencil and pad from her belt where her pirate sword would be. We order 2 pirate Pepsis and study the placemat decorated with a map of Miami. The red pirate script reads, Pirate Angels, Miami. Angelita points at a spot on a ribbon of blue running through the city. Tomas lives around here, she says, and then takes out her own map. It's the same place map, but this one has notes scribbled all over it. Here you go, tall and cool, the waitress says, and places our drinks in front of us. What do you have there, a treasure map? She leans in close. Hey, that looks like Tomas's handwriting. I'd recognize it anywhere. Tomas, Angelita asks. Tomas, see. The waitress turns toward the kitchen. Doctor, come on out here, she calls. We got 2 patients for you. A silver-haired man in a dirty white uniform gently shoulders the door open. He wipes his hand and then extends it toward Angelita. Alejandro de la Vega, at your service. I'm Angelita, and this is Julian. Where are you from? Havana. I'm from Havana, too. The gentleman glances back toward the kitchen. A surgeon there, dishwasher here. The doctor looks down at his pruny hands. It seems like a million years ago. I'm sorry, did I hear you say that you're looking for Tomas? He gave me this map, Angelita says. He said we could visit him any time. You're coming from the camp? Yes, I answer. Tomas has told me a great deal about that camp. He used to go there in the beginning to help it get ready for the Pedro Pan kids. He's always talking about the cook. Doris? Dolores, Angelita laughs. Yes, Dolores, excuse me. Tomas says that the camp is full of kids that came here all alone. Did you come without your parents? We both nod. It must be hard for you, the doctor says, shaking his head slowly. And a nightmare for your parents. Doctor! A booming voice from the kitchen rattles the silverware. I'm not paying you to talk to the customers. And remember, dishwashers are a dime a dozen. The doctor waves at the kitchen door. He won't fire me. Doctors who wash dishes are not a dime a dozen. Why are you washing dishes, I ask. Because I have 3 children and they need a place to live and food to eat. You came with your children, I ask. We left very early, when it was easier to get out. Can't you find a job as a doctor, Angelita asks. To be a doctor here, you have to pass the tests. The Cuban license is no good here. You mean you have to go back to school? Yes. I go at night and wash dishes all day. But you know, I'm happy to be here with my children. Lucky to have a job. Then the doctor stands up, winks at the waitress, and puts 2 egg salad sandwiches and a handful of sugar packets in a brown paper bag. Tomas lives down this road a bit, after a little cement bridge. Look for the trail down to the river. The doctor slips the bag to Angelita, then looks at his watch. The last bus back is at 3:30. Then we better hurry, Angelita says, and swings off the stool. As we head out the door, the doctor waves. Say hello to Senor Tomas. Angelita and I walk down a treeless avenue. There are sandy open spaces on either side waiting for new buildings. And then an occasional used car lot with rows of like-new cars waiting to be sold. This must be the bus stop, Angelita says, pointing to a bench. We sit down and she hands me her map. You aren't coming, are you, I ask. I already told you, Julian. I can't. There's still a chance Pepe's foster family might take me. The sad feelings that I've been pushing down for so long are starting to bubble up. They've been here for so long, but they're like splinters that are too deep to pull out. The only thing you can do is to ignore them. I grab my suitcase and start walking away. Julian, Angelita yells, is that it? You just get up and leave like it doesn't matter to you? Angelita, it does matter. What do you want me to do? I mumble, feeling like my face is about to crack. You know I can't go back there. Angelita gets up and stands in front of me. I know she wants a better answer. When Alcalino and Gordo got sent away, I had to learn how not to think about them, just like I learned how not to think about my parents. I guess by now, I'm getting better at it. It's not really true, but I swallow hard and start walking away. The bus is rushing up the street toward us. When I hear the hiss of its doors opening, I stop. Goodbye, Angelita. I'm sorry I can't go with you, Julian. Afraid that my legs are going to rebel and run back to the bus, I turn away as fast as I can. Remember, look for the path just past the bridge. Angelita yells out the window. Tomas said that you can't miss it. I'll try to come back next weekend. I promise. Cuídate, Julian. I start walking away, listening to the grind of the bus getting softer. Caballo will never let her out again. The dark windows of an empty factory are looking down at me. They seem to be asking, why are you here? Why all alone? I know if I don't keep walking fast, I'll change my mind and turn back. I try to remember how good I felt when I thought up this crazy plan. It might be a crazy plan, but it is my plan. Besides, it's too late to turn back. I already missed the last bus. I have to find Tomas. When I see the bridge up ahead, I start feeling a little better. Then I spot 5 guys leaning on a parked car just to the right of the bridge. They look like the kind of guys that could put someone like me in a dryer. As I walk by, one of them points his cigarette at me. Hey, where are you going? I make believe I didn't hear him and keep walking. A short guy with slick back hair points at my suitcase. Running away from home, he says, and the others laugh. I pull my suitcase close to my chest and walk faster. Hey, amigo, he calls out. Then I hear the engine roar and I start running. The car glides up behind me and someone yells, Hey, amigo, there's no need to be rude. The car stops in the middle of the bridge and the guys get out. Surrounded, I lean back against the railing. I'm trying to stay calm, think my way out. Make the right choice. A long drop into the muddy water, or a trip to the laundromat and a long ride inside a dryer. They're getting closer. I balance my suitcase on the railing. Then I climb up next to it, but my knee knocks into the suitcase. No, I scream as I watch it dropping, getting smaller and then splashing into the muddy water. What are you doing? Don't jump. We're not going to hurt you, one of the guys yells. I'm watching my suitcase with all my clothes, my notebooks, all the addresses I'll need, spinning away in the brown water. Then I remember the gold bird. My mother is going to kill me if I lose it. I balance on the thin rail. This is higher than the high board at the beach, and I was waiting until next year to try that. Don't jump, the short guy says, as my suitcase spins downstream. I can't let it get away, but my feet feel like they're glued to the railing. I can't make myself jump into the river or back on the sidewalk. I'm stuck, and they're getting closer. Then someone yanks on my belt, and I tumble back into the sidewalk. They've got me. Next stop, the laundromat. I can't believe my eyes. Angelita is hovering over me like an angel. You're here! Get up, stupid. Follow me. She yanks on my collar, then pulls me to the other side of the bridge, and disappears down the path. I trip and then slide down the steep muddy bank into the water. Angelita is already clinging to the floating suitcase when I swim up. I leave you for 5 minutes, and you get yourself into trouble. Angelita says as she tries to catch her breath. The guys up on the bridge are laughing and pointing at me. Hey, Cubanito, you're crazy, man. What was that all about? Angelita asks. I thought they were going to take me to the laundromat, put me in a dryer. The driver said gringos have a strange sense of humor. Angelita's looking at me when I finally figure out that maybe they didn't mean any harm. What am I going to do with you, Julian, she says and pats my arm. Don't worry about it. It could happen to anybody. I always thought you'd be coming with me, I say. Don't get your hopes up, she says, as we twirl downstream in the warm tide. I'm glad you're here, I say, as the sounds of flowing water and bird calls mix with the soft hum of the highway above us. The tall trees growing on the steep banks block out most of the sunny bustle of the city. Wrecked cars and piles of old tires peek out from under the green blanket of vines and bushes, creeping up the banks. Sleepy turtles roll off their logs as we sweep around the bend. Then, Angelita points at an old wooden boat 10 feet up the bank. That must be Tomas's boat. The boat is perched on tree trunks and an old refrigerator. A rope as thick as my wrist is wrapped around the hull and then tied off to a lemon tree. We paddle to a rough dock made of telephone poles and crates, all tied together. Angelita calls out, Tomas! But there's no answer, so we climb up the rickety ladder to the deck. The tipped wooden deck is crowded with rusted engine parts, bent nails, bolts, tin cans, orphan stuff that Tomas has adopted. I walk over to a pile of tin cans with a stack of flattened tin sheets next to it. That Tomas doesn't waste a thing, I say, as I study the soup cans that have been cut and then hammered flat. 2 buckets of rusty nails stand side by side. One is filled with crooked ones, and in the other, the straightened out ones. Tomas is just like Bebo, I say to Angelita, as she steps over a ball of used tin foil the size of a basketball. You never told me Bebo was a pack rat, Angelita says. Bebo doesn't have as much, but he uses whatever he's got lying around to make and fix things just like Tomas. As we're talking, a boat chugs around the bend. The outboard motor sounds like an angry mosquito as it strains against the current. Tomas is standing on a pile of wooden planks in the middle of the overloaded boat. There's a man sitting in the back, steering the boat across the current into the dock. I can't believe my eyes, Tomas yells. Angelita, Julian. Tomas seems really happy to see us. How are things at the camp, he asks. Oh, you know, the same, I guess, Angelita says. Well, you're here, and that tells me something. The guy in the back of the boat stands up and picks up a plank. Hey, Tomas, the tide is changing, he says in English, but with a different accent than Dolores. If we don't get unloaded soon, I'll never get out of here. Then you'll be making me dinner. Yes, Tomas says in his accented English and waves at us. Julian, Angelita, this is Dog. He's helping me with the boat. We wave hello and Dog tips an imaginary cap at us. That's short for Sea Dog, he says and smiles at us. He's right about the tide, Tomas says as he grabs a plank I hate to put you to work. We'll catch up over dinner. We help carry the heavy planks up the steep, muddy bank as Dog fiddles with the motor. It's not easy work, but we don't complain. As we take the last plank off the boat, Dog puts the engine in reverse and smiles. With his long, sharp canines showing, Dog looks more like a wolf than a dog. He waves goodbye and speeds back toward the bend. When we finish stacking the planks, we wash up in the river. Tomas, how did you get the boat up there? I ask. That's the way I found her. A hurricane tore her off her moorings and then carried her here. What about its owner? Owner? I'm the owner now. Dog says if you find a boat adrift, you can claim it. He called it right of salvage, finders keepers. Tomas leads the way up the ladder, then opens a hatch at the back end of the boat and points at what looks like a pile of rusty metal. Look at that engine. Have you ever seen anything as beautiful? That's incredible, Angelita says sarcastically. Did it come with a seaweed? Yeah, it looks kind of rusty, I say. When I get through with that engine, it will purr like a kitten, he says. Then we follow him down into a surprisingly clean, uncluttered cabin. We sit at a table neatly stacked with navigational charts. There's a shiny brass compass above us on a shelf, and blue life preservers hanging from pegs. This is where I come to think my way around things. I got to have order. Tomas points at his head and laughs, or this thing won't work. Then he holds up a small knife and an onion. It's dinner time. Who wants to help? I volunteer, and Tomas smiles as I cut the top and bottom of the onion, peel back the skin, slice it in half and then into quarters. I bet you worked in the kitchen with Dolores, he laughs. Yeah, I watched Dolores peel hundreds of onions, I answer. You paid attention. I like that. Tomas scoops the onions into a dented frying pan and then lights a little brass stove. So what's your plan? Plan, I ask. I know you didn't come just to see the boat. You missed the last bus. What's going on at the camp? Do you know Caballo, I ask. Caballo, sure. He's the reason I won't work at the camp. He's a crook. He wanted me to pay him for letting me work there. He said if I didn't, he'd find somebody else. Tomas shook his head. I told him the reason we had a revolution back home was because of people like him. I never went back to that camp after that. Now I like Tomas even better. I tell him about how Caballo sent my brothers away and how mean he's gotten. Tomas laughs when I tell him about all the tricks we played on him. It sounds like you got the revolution started. It's funny how these things follow us around. If I go back, you'll make my life miserable first, and then they'll send me away to an orphanage or worse, I say. No, it would not be a good idea to go back, he says. I don't blame you for running away, but still, it takes a lot of nerve to do what you did. I was most scared of what would happen if I stayed. I can understand that. I guess that's why I left too. He nods and looks around for an extra plate. Tomas, you never told me how you got out of Cuba, Angelita says. It was my father who got me out. He was afraid of what would happen to me if I stayed. Your father? See, he was a mechanic in the Navy. He hated it, but when I turned 16, he insisted I join the Navy and become a mechanic too. I thought that was strange because he used to say that I could do much better than that. One day they sent us to Cardenas Bay to fix a motor launch that belonged to his captain. We were on the dock when my father told me to row out and get started. He would join me later. When I got on board, I saw that the gas tank was full and that the waterproof compartment next to the wheel was crammed with charts for a trip to Florida. I started the engine and it was running like a top. I could tell right away that it had just been tuned, probably by him. And nobody can tune an engine like my father. He waved for me to run it, so I pulled up the anchor and flew across the bay. As I roared back past the dock, I saw two naval officers standing with my father. The two Navy guys were signaling for me to come in. Tomas smiled, but my father was standing right behind him, pointing north. That's when I figured out why he had talked me into joining the Navy, why he sent me out to tune an engine that he probably had just tuned. Just like that. Tomas snaps his fingers. I decided, I pulled back on the throttle and headed straight for the dock. At the last second, I turned and sent up a rooster tail of water that soaked all three of them. I made one more pass, laughing and hollering like a madman, so that they wouldn't think that my father had put me up to it. The last time I saw him, he and the Navy guys were yelling and shaking their fists at me, but then he stepped behind them and flashed me the good luck sign. I motored north, thinking about how he must have planned the whole escape, and never said a word to me, just in case. He did his part, and now I have to do mine. Angelita is standing next to the table, clutching the plates to her chest, listening. You left just like that? No clothes, no goodbyes? Not really. I found a change of clothes and some dollars in a locker below. But the thing that still really bothers me is that I didn't get to say goodbye to my mother. How could you just leave like that? That's something I'd have to think about for a while, she says as she lays out 3 different colored plates. I'm the same way, Angelita. I like to plan, get used to the idea. But there was no time for that. I had to decide on the spot. He made me jump, Tomas smiles. I think my father knows me too well. Tomas, that took a lot more nerve than what I did. I had time to plan and decide, I say. Tomas shrugs. Well, now that you're here, you're welcome to stay as long as I'm here. Then he nods at the little stove. Give those beans a turn, will you? As I stood by the stove, I saw that Pirate Angel's calendar hanging on the cabinet. The 11th day of the next month was circled in red. Are you leaving on the 11th, I ask? Tomas takes a wooden spoon out of my hand. If you don't stir those beans, they'll burn. Armando. This morning I find the forward cabin empty. The deck crowded with clucking seagulls, but no Angelita or Tomas. Down in the galley, a cup of café con leche sits on the stove with a plate on top to keep it warm. The note sticking out from underneath the plate reads, Amigo, I'm off to the fields. El Tomatron calls me. Lazy Armando at the Fontainebleau Hotel always needs help. Catch the number 11 bus, just past the bridge. It will take you right to the hotel. Tell him Tomas sent you. Below that, in a loopy feminine script, there's more. Julian, you already know why I can't stay with you, but I had to make sure you got here safely. I'll stay in touch through Tomas. You're in good hands, Angelita. I knew that she had to go back, but still, I was hoping. Shoo, I yell and wave my arms as the flock of seagulls lifts off squawking and complaining. I'm alone on the bank of a strange river, and I'm starting to get that scared, lonely feeling again. I better get moving. Do something, so that I won't think about Angelita or my brothers and my parents. Those thoughts only make me feel bad. I'm going to put on a clean t-shirt and get out of here. When I open my suitcase, I see the blue lining and I think about my mother, running her fingers along it. I'm trying to picture the little gold bird sleeping in there, and trying not to think about my mother's face. Everything in the suitcase is wet, so I take out my shirts, pants, and hang them around the cabin so they'll dry. I put on a clean shirt, wet and wrinkled, but clean, and head up the hill to the bus stop. Sitting on the bus, I feel better. I have to pay attention. I don't want to miss the hotel. I wonder if Angelita got back to the camp. I miss her already. When the bus driver announces Fontainebleau Hotel, I run out through the hissing door into a blue cloud of bus exhaust that's now drifting over the lush gardens of the hotel. As I walk past the tall metal gate, I notice that there's a guy guarding the front doors. The top hat and the circus general's uniform he's wearing makes him look important. He crosses his arms, steps in front of the door, and watches me walk around the fountain in the middle of the circular driveway. Then he points at the gate and yells, Shoo! I stop in the middle of the driveway. Shoo who? I look behind me. Shoo me? He points at me. You, out! He says in a tone of voice that a stray dog would understand. I plant my feet in the asphalt and cross my arms too. Who does he think he is, talking to me like that? My father used to take us to bigger and better hotels than this one, and in Cuba, the doormen didn't have to dress up like circus performers. He starts walking in my direction and getting bigger with every step, so I turn around and head for the gate. As I walk out, I look at my wet, wrinkled shirt and grubby shorts. I guess I don't look like I belong here. Just then, a yellow cab flies in through the gate and screeches around the other side of the fountain. I duck into the bushes as the doorman rushes over to open the door of the cab. He opens the trunk and sticks his head inside. As he struggles to pull out an enormous suitcase, I slip in through a smaller side door. I make a beeline for the 2 brilliant stripes of blue sky and creamy white sand glaring into the back of the dark lobby. I'm staring up at a chandelier the size of a car when someone grabs my shoulder. Excuse me, may I help you? A little man wearing a red jacket and a Turkish hat with a gold tassel hanging in front of his stubby nose is standing right behind me. He looks like an organ grinder's monkey. I wiggle free of the hairy paw gripping my shoulder. "Are you a guest here?" the monkey man asks. "Armando. I come to see Armando," I say. "Oh, the guy with the umbrellas?" "Si, Armando." He looks at me and curls his nostrils as if I smell bad. "Follow me." We cut across the lobby from the beach, then into a big room full of black ladies in blue uniforms, folding and then stacking sheets. The next room is full of men washing dishes. They're all speaking Spanish. The monkey man grabs my arm and hustles me out of a side door. We rush past the garbage cans, then down a dirt path behind the swimming pool. The smell of suntan lotion and the sparkling blue water is making me homesick. We walk around the pool to the edge of the sand, and then he stops. He wipes off his shiny little boots and points at a striped tent down on the beach. I feel like asking him why we didn't just walk straight here, but I know the answer. He didn't want the guests to see me. I take my sneakers off and start walking across the hot sand to the tent. When a sea breeze blows the tent flap open, I see a large man sitting back on a chaise lounge with what looks like a flock of yellow butterflies fluttering above his head. He's scribbling something into a yellow notebook. "Armando?" I ask. "Just un momento, please," he says, not bothering to look up. He tears out a yellow note, waves it at me, then hands me a safety pin. "Arriba!" He points over his head and to the right. As I pin up the piece of paper and say in Spanish, "I'm Julian, a friend of Tomas." "Only in English, por favor," he answers. "Speak English, I learn," he says, and then points at the butterfly notes. "Facts are very important. Thomas Edison inventó el teléfono by accident." Then he sits up and extends his hand in my direction. "Un amigo de Tomás, el Edison cubano, is a friend of mine." Before we can shake, he waves his hand over his head with a flourish and then bows. "Armando, in your service." "Tomás said that you'd give me work." Armando motions for me to come closer. He reaches up and squeezes my arm. While holding my arm with one hand, he opens his dictionary with the other, and leaves to the right page. "Let's see, fuerte, muy fuerte, sí, strong, very strong," he says. His voice sounds very familiar to me. Just then, a woman with dark glasses the size of saucers and shiny gold hair pokes her head into the tent. "Armando, dear, you promised to have our umbrella up before we came out." She walks right past me to Armando's side and puts her hand on his shoulder. Armando stands up. "Mrs. Wilson, mi amor, I do not forgotten." His voice is syrupy sweet as he ushers her out the door. "Ah, Jess, here it is." He stops to read one of his notes. "In a shake of your lamb's tail, it will be did." Mrs. Wilson giggles. "Oh, Armando." Armando gestures in my direction. "Mi assistants will bring it to you." "Please hurry, Armando. My little Billy will be positively singed if we don't have an umbrella." Then she pushes the flap open. "Pronto, boy, pronto," she says, without even looking at me. Then she flashes Armando a red lipstick smile and walks out into the sun. "Julian, this first customer, Mrs. Wilson, is a good tipper. Sink it in deep, Julian. The wind is—" I wait as he looks up a word. "Sí, capricios. The wind is capricious today. Capricious, fickle, changeable." I search in the pile for an umbrella as Armando leaps madly through his dictionary. He's rolling a new word slowly in his mouth. I hear him read slowly. "Singe, to expose the carcass of a bird or animal to a flame in order to remove unwanted feathers, bristles, or hair." Then he calls, "Julian, for Billy's sake, hurry!" Billy's mother doesn't notice that the umbrella is much bigger than I am. She points the straw of her drink at her Billy. He looks up from his Tarzan comic as I try to push the umbrella into the sand. I want to tell him that I have the same comic book. It's back home under my bed, but he gives me a funny look and then rolls away. I don't like the way he looked at me. I get the feeling that he thinks he's better than me. I manage to stand the umbrella up and pull it open just in time for a gust of wind to grab it. The umbrella leans dangerously close in Billy's direction. The sand is flying as I wrestle the red monster upright. When I get it under control, I look at them and smile. Both are wearing a layer of white sand stuck on the greasy suntan lotion. They're not happy. Mrs. Wilson clutches her son and yells, "Armando!" Armando stomps out and pushes the red umbrella deeper into the sand. He croons an apology and then bows to Mrs. Wilson and her itchy son. Suddenly, I realize where I've heard that voice. You're Armando. Armando. Loving Armando. My mother listens to you every night. I stop and stare at him. He's a real famous person. He pulls me back to the tent, gesturing theatrically. My best tipper, and you almost killed her child, he says, reverting to Spanish. Your mother used to listen to me, he corrects, and bows his head. Then he straightens up and strikes a pose. But mark my words, Armando will rise again. Then he waves his dictionary at me. First, I learned the English, he says, as if he's narrating a movie about himself and his heroic quest. In the meantime, he says in a normal tone of voice, I set the umbrellas up in the morning, and you can take them down in the evening. Armando disappears into the tent, and I'm left outside, not sure what to do next. I'm still watching the tent flap waving in the breeze when he pokes his head out. You're still here? How can I study with you standing there? Shoo, you're free, go explore, but come back at 5. I wander down the beach among the Americans in the sand, reading, sleeping, and eating lunch in the shade. At first they don't seem too different from the Cubans in the sand, but then I notice that there's no music playing and no one is dancing. The beach is quieter. Even on the beach, everything looks very organized. Each family has their blankets, chairs, and coolers just the right distance from their neighbor. It looks to me like they went to a lot of trouble to relax. I wonder if I'm the only person that notices these things. Even the way that the kids are playing looks different to me. Up ahead, at the edge of the waves, a little boy and a girl are frantically shoveling, trying to save the castle that they built too close to the waves. I walk up and smile at them as I pick up an extra bucket. I fill it with sand, turn it over, and stack the sand to cover a hole in the castle wall. They do the same, and soon the wall is high enough to keep back the rippling waves. They're chattering away really fast in English. I can't understand everything they're saying, but it doesn't matter, because we're building a castle in the sand together. We have just started raising the towers at each corner when the mother sweeps down and pulls her children out of the castle. I look up at her. The sun is blazing a halo around her head, but still, I can tell she's scowling at me. As they walk away, she's wagging her finger at her kids. I can't hear what she's saying either, but I recognize the don't play with strangers wag. It's the same in every language. I don't blame her. My mother would do the same thing. I take my wrinkled shirt off and try to lie down inside the castle, but I'm too big, so I poke my legs out through the walls. This is the first time I've ever felt too big to do anything. It's usually the other way around. I guess now, without my brothers trying so hard to make me feel small, I get to be as big as I want. Sometimes I miss them, but at the same time, I think I like being with Angelita and Tomas better. They let me do older things that my brothers would say I was too young to do. The waves are washing the castle away, and my skin is starting to turn red, so I run into the ocean and let the tide carry me out to the edge of the deep water. My mother would never let me go out this far, where you can't see the bottom. Deep down in the blue water, a long shadow glides by below me, just above the point where the slender shafts of light fade into the blue. My brain starts scrolling through every shark story I've ever heard. At first I swim slowly, so I won't splash too much, but by the time I get close to the beach, I'm sprinting. I stumble out of the water and then throw myself down on the sand, where the waves can still reach me. I make believe that I'm the lone survivor of a shipwreck. After I catch my breath, I get up to explore my deserted island. There's a strange being walking down the beach toward me. I think it's a girl, but she seems to have something growing. No, it's balanced on top of her head. When she reaches up and adjusts a stack of palm frond hats balanced on her head, I jump up and run behind her. Hola, tú eres cubana, I say, but she doesn't stop or respond. I see my first American shark today, I say to her in English, but she just keeps walking. I make hats too. You Cuban? I say. She stops and looks at me with a tired expression on her face. What makes you think I'm Cuban? She answers in Spanish. The hats, I say, pointing at the leaning tower of hats on her head. What about the hats? She says and starts walking away. I follow her to the shade of a palm, where she sits down on a low wall and starts weaving 4 palm fronds together. At the camp, some of the kids made hats all day long. I say as I pick out 3 long palm fronds from her pile. I bet that's where you learned how to make them. I say as I weave the green spears together. So what? I can tell she's not impressed. She's probably 16. We must have gone to the same camp. You're nosy, she answers as she weaves the hat into shape. Do you sell these? Is that how you make your living, I ask? It's one of the ways. I stick my hand out. My name is Julian. Her hands are surprisingly dirty. I'm not used to seeing girls with such dirty hands. Her chipped, peeling red fingernails have been chewed painfully short. Lucia, she says without interrupting the rhythm of her busy fingers. Did your parents come and get you out of the camp? No, they didn't. Are you always so nosy? Where do you live? She sweeps her stringy hair back behind her ear. I live at a foster home on 10th Street. They take kids in from the camps. I bet it's nice, I say. At the camp, if you get sent to a foster home, it usually means living with a real family in a real house. It's a lot better than getting sent to an orphanage. She gives me a flat look. It's not nice, she says, and then grabs the weaving out of my hands. They do it for the money. She unravels everything I did. If you don't start it the right way, it won't end up right. Who's going to want a lopsided hat? Her practiced fingers fold, tuck, and pull the hat into shape, and then she hands it back to me. What do you mean they do it for the money, I ask. It's like a business. They get money for every kid they take in. What do you mean, I ask again. What I mean is that the less they spend on each kid, the more they keep for themselves. All they feed us is this weird stuff called grits. And look at the clothes they give us. She pulls at the frayed bottom of the man's plaid shirt hanging over cut-off shorts. They buy these used at the Goodwill store, by the pound. That's not fair, I say, and she shakes her head at me. You're telling me. One of the girls I came with was taken in by a nice rich family. She's got her own room, nice clothes. They even sent her to a private school. She invited me to swim in her pool, but I don't have a bathing suit, and I can't show up dressed like this. Can't you tell somebody about what they're doing? Look, I'm not going to sell any hats with you sitting there asking me dumb questions. I'm trying to ignore her not-so-subtle hints. What else do you do for money? Muy bien. I see you are the persistent type. Bueno, I'll answer that question if you promise to leave me alone. Deal? Okay, I guess. Later on in the afternoon, I draw pictures on the sidewalk over there. She tips her head past the big hotel behind us. I put a cup out, and the tourists throw their green dollars into it. They give you money for drawing? That sounds easier than carrying heavy umbrellas around. It's not as easy as you think. You gotta keep an eye out for Ramirez. Who's Ramirez? He's a cop. He and his partner ride around in their big black sedan looking for runaway kids. He knows I've got a place to live, but if he's bored, he'll make me stop drawing, take me back to the house, and then I can't make any money. What do you do with the money? Hey, one question, remember? This is the last question. Please? I know when I'm being a pest. I know I'm clinging on to her, but she feels and talks like home. She's familiar, and I have no one else to talk to. I send it to my mother in Cuba, she says, and then takes a short, shallow breath like she's about to cry. I'm sorry, I say, and put my hand on the sleeve of her shirt. Sorry for what? I'm all right. She moves her arm away. My mother is buying an airplane ticket with the money to come here. Are you satisfied now? Now I feel ashamed of myself for bothering her. You have to go. Here come some customers. Will I see you tomorrow, maybe? I say hopefully as a couple leans in to check out the hats. Not if I see you first, she says. The sun is just above the horizon by the time I finish dragging and then stacking the umbrellas next to Armando's tent. He's inside, repeating the word, connect, y cut, over and over. When he sees me come in, he stops. What a strange language, this English. Then he pokes his head outside and checks on the umbrellas. Muy bien. He takes a handful of bills out of his pocket and puts 2 tens into an envelope. Here, give this to Tomás for me. $1 for freedom. Para libertad. Para libertad, I ask, as he hands me the envelope. And tell him that I talked to my brother. He and his novia will be ready on the 12th. What are they doing on the 12th? Armando looks at me and then shakes his head. He didn't tell you? Tell me what? Nothing, nothing, never mind, he says, and then digs deeper into his pocket. Here, put your hands out. Armando pours the change into my hands and then throws in 3 $1 bills. There, not bad for a day at the beach. See you tomorrow afternoon. And just tell Tomas I'll have the rest of his money, the money I owe him next week. I fold the envelope into my pocket and start walking to the bus stop. What's the money for? What are Armando's brother and his girlfriend ready for on the 12th? I've got a funny feeling that the 12th, circled in red on Tomas's calendar, is part of that answer. The coins in my pocket are jingling as I climb into the bus and then walk to an empty seat. We're driving down a boulevard lined with palm trees and hotels when I spot a crowd of tourists standing in a circle, looking down at someone drawing on the sidewalk. When we get closer, I see that it's Lucia. Tourists are dropping money into her little cardboard box. I want to get off to see what she's drawing, but I know she wouldn't be happy to see me. She's got customers. The plan. This morning, the sound of an electric saw ripping into the hall wakes me up. I climb out of the cabin, look over the railing, and find Tomas fitting one of the salvaged planks into the hull of the boat. When he sees me, he waits for me to climb down and hands me one end of a plank. Hold it in place there. Good. Now push it in. He picks some rusty nails out of the bucket and starts hammering away. I'm glad you're here. He smiles at me with 4 nails sticking out of his mouth. We spend the morning replacing all of the split or rotten planks. Then, while I sand the planks down to the bare wood, Tomas disappears under the tarp. Working with Tomas is just like working with Bebo. They never ask if I can do the job. They just show me what to do and then leave me alone. They don't doubt that I can do it, and I don't either. I like that. Tomas comes back with 3 dented paint cans. Here, I found these in the garbage. He hands me a stiff paintbrush. Maestro, it would be an honor, he says, and then points at the bare wood. I paint the bare planks, and then without asking, I paint a big eye with black paint on the bow of the boat. When Tomas comes down to inspect my work, he laughs. El ojo! The eye! It's perfect. How did you know? I saw a picture of an Arawak canoe in a book once. It had an eye carved in front. The book said that the eye could see things that the people couldn't. You see that brass compass up there by the wheel? That's my eye. I paid a lot of money for it. It's the most important thing on this boat. But I guess you can never have too many eyes when you're in the middle of the ocean, Tomas says. We finish, working late into the afternoon, and I'm hot and hungry. Let's go get some shrimp for dinner, Tomas says as he puts 2 nets into the back of a small skiff. Climb in. He pushes off and then starts rowing against the tide. They're down by the last bridge, he says as he pulls on the oars. The shrimp swim in with the tide. The traffic in the city are buzzing above us, but it's peaceful down here in the green jungle water. We glide under an overhanging tree and Tomas nods at the lemons above us. See those 2 babies right behind me, he says, without turning around. Grab them. We'll make Tomasade tomorrow. By the time we get to the bridge, the tide has turned and is now flowing into the river. Tomas ties the boat to a piling, its bow pointing into the stream. He hands me a net. Here, you take that side. He dips and gently swirls his net into the dark water. The shrimp are just under the surface, he says as he lifts his net and shakes a handful of shrimp into the boat. I try the same motion, but my net comes up empty. By the time I figure out how to spot the ghostly shrimp and then scoop them out, Tomas has already filled the bucket 3/4 full. On my last try, my net comes up full. Now you got the hang of it. Tomas puts his net down and rows to the bank. We'll eat the ones you just caught, he says, and picks up the bucket. These we'll sell to the guys up on the bridge. Then he swats a mosquito off his neck. We better hurry. I hold the boat as he talks to the fisherman on the bank, and by the time he comes back, a black cloud of mosquitoes is gathering under the bridge. Let's get out of here, Tomas yells as he climbs aboard. We got the tide now, so row us out to the middle of the channel. There's a breeze there that'll blow these little vampires away. Tomas taught me how to cook shrimp with rice. It tastes better than Bebo's, but I would never tell Bebo that. Every night after dinner, Tomas crosses out that day in the calendar. Then he studies the tide charts and weather maps. The line of excess is getting closer to the red circle around the 11th. Tonight he draws a blue circle that looks like the moon over the 9th of the month. What's that for, I ask. The highest tide of the year. It's going to be a monster tide. Then the rain should start here. He draws angled blue lines from the 7th to the 12th. Rain, heavy rain, he says, and points at a map of the tip of Florida. This is our little river wriggling out of the Everglades. Between the rainwater draining out of the swamps and the high tide, this river's going to rise high enough to set the boat free, just in time. Now the numbers and circles, Armando's money, and the calendar are all starting to make sense. I bet Tomas is going back to Cuba to pick up his parents. That's his part of the deal with his father. That's why he's in such a hurry to finish his boat. Would that be just in time for your trip to Cuba, I ask? Tomas whips around. What did that windbag Armando tell you? He didn't tell me anything. He just said something about dollars for freedom. I figured out the rest by myself, I say, but he's not impressed. Tomas paces around the cabin shaking his head. I knew I couldn't trust him. If I didn't need his share to buy the gas, I wouldn't have let him in, but I have 14 people waiting for me. Are they all your family, I ask? No, it's just my mother and my father. The others are people that can't get out of the country any other way. Their families have given me money to help with the boat so that I can get them out. How much do they have to give you? I ask. They give me what they can. I would do it for nothing, but it would take me much longer to make the money to fix the boat and then buy gas for the trip. I reach deep into my pocket and pull out the $10 bill the man gave me for the box of cigars, the 3 singles and a handful of change from the umbrellas. This is all the money I have. Would you bring my parents too? Tomas stops pacing and smiles at me. Julian, it's not that simple. I'll work really hard, save my money. I can help with the boat. You said yourself that I'm pretty good with engines. Julian, this is not like going fishing. It's very dangerous. If any one of these 14 people tells the wrong person, or if we get caught, we could all end up in jail. Please, Tomas, I miss my parents, and they're not going to let them out. I know it. Tomas looks away. Julian, this is a big decision for you to make, for them and us. If I let you in, I have to trust that you won't make a mistake and give it all away. I can keep a secret. You don't even know the plan. Tomas throws his pencil down on top of the charts. It's stuffy in here. I can't think. Let's go down to the river. There's a full silvery moon glowing behind us in a cloudless sky. At the river's edge, Tomas bends over to inspect a piece of rope sticking out of the mud. It's all in the timing, he says as he pulls on the muddy rope. We get to Havana as the sun is setting, when their fishing boats are returning. Sneak into the harbor with them and then tie up on the Regla side. Then, at sunrise, we follow the first ferry across to the Havana dock. I know that ferry, I say as if he had just mentioned the name of a friend. My father keeps his fishing boat just on the other side of that dock. Tomas nods and continues. He picks up his people, and then I pick up my people, the 14 that just happened to miss the first ferry. If they ask them why they're not taking that ferry, they'll say that they're waiting for someone, and then they'll take the next one. Then we sneak out with the other fishing boats and make a run for it. That's a pretty good plan, I say. That's the only way I could think of to get all those people together with their bags and things on a dock without police getting suspicious. It sounds perfect to me. Every plan sounds foolproof until you start. Then the 1,001 things you didn't think about go wrong, all at the same time. What do you do then, I ask? Well, then you have to improvise, invent. And what if the floodwaters don't lift the boat? I ask Tomas as he cleans his knife in the water. I have 14 people counting on me. If I have to, I'll lift the boat myself. He cuts the rope. So do you think your parents would do it? Are they up for an adventure? I look back across the gray muck at the peeling wooden hull of the boat. Now the boat doesn't look as big or as seaworthy as it did before. I think so, I say, trying to sound more confident than I am. My brother Arcolino said if my mother really knew what was happening to us here, she would swim here if she had to. When Tomas finishes coiling up the rope, he seems to have made up his mind. Okay, they can come. but you have to listen closely to my instructions. First, you have to be very careful about what you say when you call them, because the government listens in on calls from the United States. Tomas explains in great detail where they have to go and when they have to be there, and the password they have to use. This is a lot more complicated than I thought, but I just nod and try not to look too worried. It was so much easier when my brothers made all the decisions and I just followed them around. Now I start wondering if I'm doing the right thing for my parents. What if they get caught or the boat sinks? Am I doing this because I miss them, or do I just want to be the hero again, the one who helped them escape? Tomas wouldn't do it to be a hero. He's doing it to keep his word, to do the right thing. I bend over next to Tomas, cup my hands, scoop up the water just like he does. A glowing reflection of the moon, the size of a ping-pong ball, floats in the palm of each hand. I lay the little moons back into the water, watching as they swim toward each other in a hurry to be together again. I want my family to be together again. That's the only thing that I'm sure of. Making Tomas aid. Tomas is still thumping around the cabin when I wake up the next morning. I watch him stack his charts and clear the counters. He's organizing, thinking. Buenos dias, Tomas. Hola, Julian. He takes out a beautiful brass compass from the cabinet and gently places it on the counter. Isn't this a beauty? He says proudly and then wipes the dome top with his sleeve. This is the only new piece of equipment I've bought for this boat. My father always said that you should never scrimp on the compass. I get up to take a closer look. Where did you get it, I ask. Pops, the guy at the pumps. He gave me a good deal on it. He has a marine goods store right on the dock. Someone ordered it and never picked it up, he says. Then he picks up 4 brass nuts and a shiny metal wrench from a bowl and starts up the stairs. Come up with me. I'm going to put it in today. Tomas clears off a place behind the wheel. Then he carefully lines up the 4 holes on the bottom of the compass with the bolts sticking out of the dash. Are you going to help Armando with the umbrellas today? He asks as he slides the washer onto the bolt and then threads a nut. Armando doesn't need me in the morning. He just wants me to take them down in the afternoon. You have the mornings free then? Yep, I can go with you to the tomato fields and help with the tomotron. I can tune it up for you again. You could come with me, but I've got something better for you to do. He puts down his silver wrench and then walks down into the cabin and comes back up with 2 large beach bags. If you go get the oranges, we can make Tomas aid tonight. Then tomorrow morning you can go sell it on the street. You'll make more money there in one morning than a whole day of picking tomatoes. If it's okay with you, that money can be your contribution to the trip. Whatever you earn will go to help your parents out. Of course, it's okay, I answer. Good. This won't take long. After you finish, you can help Armando in the afternoon. I'll show you where to go to get the oranges. He sketches out the directions on a piece of brown paper bag. After Tomas leaves, I follow his penciled arrows, matching the names and the street signs to the ones he wrote on the paper in his clear engineer's hand. When I get to the red X, I'm standing at the entrance ramp of a highway. There's no X and not one orange tree in sight, but I know this has to be it. Tomas drew the map. At the traffic light, cars are jostling for position like it's the beginning of a race. An 18-wheeler jumps for the green light and then hurtles towards me, twin plumes of black smoke rising from the exhaust stacks. The driver pulls on his air horn. The truck tips slightly as it turns into the ramp, and bushels of fresh, plump oranges hiccup out of the open top. The oranges bounce on the pavement and then roll into the gutter. The driver gives me another blast from the horn and speeds up the ramp. I can see his red face in the rearview mirror. He's smiling as I run over and begin filling my bag. One more truck goes by and my 2 bags are brimming with oranges. After I drop off the oranges at the boat, I hurry back up the hill to catch the bus to the beach. On the way into the city, I try to figure out how I'm going to break the news to my parents. How am I going to tell them where and when to go without giving the plan away? There might be someone listening in on the call. By the time I've collected and stacked all the umbrellas, I think I know what to say to get them to the dock. I'm still rehearsing my code words as I run into the tent to get my money. I'm jumpy, in a hurry to make my first phone call, but Armando wants me to listen to him read out loud in English. I try to pay attention, but after 30 seconds of his heavy accent and the mangled words, I have no idea what he's reading about. When he finishes, he asks me what I thought of his reading. I shrug. I don't, but Armando is not really interested in what I think. It would make no difference to him if he were reading to a chair. Maybe it could be better, but I think it was very good, he says with his heavy accent. He finally reaches for the money can, pours out the change into my hand, and then adds 2 bills. Gracias, Armando, I say, and then disappear through the flap. The monkey man is talking to one of the maids over by the front desk as I sneak into the lobby. I scoot from column to column until I get to the phone booth. Making sure not to close the door so the light stays off, I sit down and then dial the number for the international operator. When she comes on, I pump my quarters into the slot and then wait in the dark. Finally, the operator announces she's made the connection, and I hear the faint but familiar ringing tones. 1, 2, 3, then, Hola! The woman's voice sounds like it's 900 miles away from my ear, not the 90 miles that separates me from my house. This is Julian. I want to talk to my mother or my father. I feel a knot starting to form in my throat. This is the first time I have spoken those words in a long time. Julian? I don't know any Julian. You must have the wrong number, the woman says. No, don't hang up, please. I'm calling from the United States. I don't have any more money, and I have to talk to my parents. Your parents? Oh, you mean the Gusanos that used to live here. Gusanos? Now I recognize the voice at the other end. It seems like 100 years ago, but I can picture her face, remember her pointing the pork chop at us like it was yesterday. What did you do with my parents? I yell into the receiver. Mira, niño, I don't know what those Yankees are stuffing into your head. We have not done anything to your parents. This house is too big for just 2 people. They don't live here anymore. Then she barks, Stupido! I told you! Dig to the left! Do you know where they are? Did they leave a telephone number? No. See, right there, by the kitchen door. I can barely make out what she's saying because someone is hammering away in the background. Do you have their number? I yell into the receiver. I don't think she can hear me. What's that noise? It sounds like you're digging up our floor. We're digging. Then the woman stops, but the hammering continues. Caramba! Why didn't I think of it before? She yells. You lived in this castle. You can tell me where they buried the money, their jewels, you know, the things they should have handed over to the government when they left. I'm almost sure they didn't bury anything. I would have known about it if they did, but maybe if I play along, she'll help me find my parents. The money, I ask? Sí, querido. I'll tell you where your parents are if you tell me where the money is. Even over the pounding noise, her fake sweet voice is making me sick. I swallow hard. Okay, but you go first. Look, my little gusano, this house is going to look like a piece of Swiss cheese when I get through with it, but I'll find their loot eventually, whether you tell me or not. On the other hand, you might never see your parents again, and that would be so sad. It's under the... where? Under the kitchen sink, I blurt out. They lifted up a tile and then dug a really deep hole. How deep, she asks, but then I hear her yell, En la cocina, dig under the sink. Can you tell me now where my parents are, please? I'm so sorry, Gusanito, but I have no idea where they are. They could be living out in the street, just like we did before the revolution. Then she yells, En la cocina! There's a loud click, then a hum, and I'm left sitting in the dark, listening to the dial tone, wondering where my parents could be. I walk out of the cool lobby and sit down in the blazing sun. I hug my knees and stare out at the sea. This sea is much darker and wilder than my sea. This sun is different, too. It stings my skin and its light is too sharp and clear for daydreamers. But I guess that's good, because it helps me see things clearly. I take out my little notebook and look through the list of relatives and friends that my mother made for me. I'll call every number until I find them. It's not going to be easy, but just like Tomas, I won't give up, no matter what. That night after dinner, we cut and squeeze the oranges, lemons, and limes for the Tomasade. Tomas puts the squeezed-out skins into a shopping bag. Thanks, Tomas, I say, and then grab the bag. Here, I'll get rid of these. I'm afraid he will ask me if I got through to my parents, so I run out of the cabin as fast as I can. I don't want to tell him yet that they aren't living at home anymore. What if he gives their place in the boat to someone else? Selling Thomas Aid. In my dream, my brothers let me go with them to the beach. We sit in the warm sand as the big land crabs crawl out of their holes to dance in the moonlight. A man and a woman are walking at the water's edge towards us. They look familiar, but it isn't until they are right in front of us that I recognize them. Mommy, Papi, I shout as Tomas shakes me awake. Buenos dias, amigo. I was dreaming about my parents, I say, and look away. You were calling them in your sleep, Tomas says. I guess they snuck up on me when I was asleep. It's not fair that you can't control your dreams, he says, and then winks at me. When I'm awake, I can concentrate real hard on what I'm doing. Then I don't have to think about them. Tomas rubs his chin. I know what you mean. That's why I try to stay busy all the time. After breakfast, we tie a small folding table and a cooler to a set of wheels that once belonged to a folding shopping cart. He uses the extra rope to make a handle on one of the sides of the table. Now you got something to hang on to. They'll let me take this on the bus, right? I ask. No problem. I've gotten even bigger things past the bus driver. Just smile as you go by, Tomas says as we pull it up the hill and then walk to the gas station to buy ice. By the time you get there, the Thomas Aid will be nice and cold. Tomas carefully packs the ice around the jugs in the cooler. Then he shakes my hand and wishes me luck. I wobble down the road, each wheel insisting on going in its own direction. The bus stop is just a few steps away when a dark sedan drives by really slow. Inside the car, two men in black are scanning the empty lots in between buildings on either side of the road. I can feel their eyes behind the dark sunglasses raking over me. I wonder if that's Ramirez, the cop who drives around picking up runaway kids. I jerk my cart into the high grass on the side of the road, lay it down and then crawl under it. My junky old table should blend in with the trash in the empty lot. But I'm thinking that they're going to hear my heart, beating as loud as the squawking of a police radio. When they stop by the bridge, one of the men gets out and looks downstream in the direction of the boat. Finally, he gets back into the car and they drive off. I wait under the table until I'm sure they're not coming back. Then I dust myself off and bump my table and cooler back on the sidewalk. As I walk toward the bus stop, I'm wondering why the man looked down at the river. Was he looking for Tomas's boat? Angelita is the only one at the camp that knows I'm here. By the time I reach the bus stop, I'm sure that Caballo somehow made Angelita confess and now Ramirez is looking for me. When the bus door wheezes open, I lift my table up the steps, climb in and then drop 2 dimes into the clinking counting machine. Sliding past the driver as smooth as I can, I walk to the back of the bus, my eyes glued to the ground so that nobody can identify me. At my stop, I walk to the back door of the bus and check one more time for the black sedan. The coast is clear, so I drop my cart onto the sidewalk. Angelita and I walked down the street on the day that I ran away from the camp. That was a week ago, and already the streets look very different. In place of the building they were tearing down, there's a Tinker Toy steel frame rising for the new one. The one they were working on at the other end of the street is finished, and now draped with banners and signs announcing its grand opening. The mannequins are still in the store window, but now they're wearing clothes. If it weren't for the bikes and the new paint smell, I wouldn't be so sure that I was on the right street. I set up my table behind the bicycles, far enough from the street to be hidden and still keep an eye out for Ramirez's car. The businessmen scurrying by on the sidewalk are too busy to stop. The tourists squint at my crooked handwriting and then walk by. I'm wondering what I'm going to do with my warm, watery Thomas Aid when a woman wearing a feathered hat stops in front of my table. Her white poodle sniffs at my knee as she opens her purse. I pick up a cup to pour out my first drink, but she shakes her head. You poor thing, she says, and then drops a dollar bill into my cup. Poor thing. Before I can ask her what she means, she yanks on her poodle, then walks away. I think poor means pobre, I say out loud to the stream of people flowing around me in their hats and flowered shirts. Across the street in a store window, the boy in the dirty t-shirt and crumpled shorts just stands there holding his cup. I wave at the reflection, and it waves back. Hey kid, you selling drinks or posing for pictures? A construction worker asks as three of his buddies grab cups from my stack. Is this self-serve or are you poor? I'm no poor, I say. Okay, kid, you're not poor. Don't get huffy. We've all been there. The man laughs, and a group of guys in dusty yellow hard hats crowd in and start pouring themselves glass after glass of Thomasade. I don't even have to ask for the money. They keep dropping dimes and quarters into my cup. As they stand around my table telling jokes and looking at the pretty girls walking by. When their coffee break is over, both of my jugs are empty and my cup is full. They pat me on the back as they head back to work and make me promise to come back tomorrow. I pack up the cooler and the table as quick as I can and check for Ramirez, and then I roll across the street to cool off in the big department store. I pull my squeaking cart down an aisle crowded with car parts, lawn furniture, and clothes. Mostly things that I've never seen before. I can't read the labels, so I just let my eyes swim across the shelves. But when I spot the big colored chalks, I stop. They look like the ones that my mother gave me in Cuba. There are 12 colors inside. I turn the box over and over, thinking that $1.39 is a lot of money. But then I remember Lucia and the tourists throwing money into her cup. I'm sure I can get them to throw just as many coins in my cup. As I walk to the beach, I'm thinking about what I'm going to draw. Palm trees, boats, blue skies, and clouds. Or maybe El Morro, the fort at the entrance of Havana Harbor. I cross the boulevard and find a shady spot where there are plenty of people walking by, and the sidewalk is not too rough. I open up my box of chalks, tip my head, and then pace around the square of sidewalk. A vague and familiar shape is rising out of the gum spots and soda stains on the cement. Kneeling down, I draw my first line. It curves into a circle, and there is the nostril of a horse. I flesh out his muzzle, then flash along the arc of his neck all the way to the flying tail. I make my way back along the belly, up and down the legs, and now the horse is running. I erase the bumps and the shapes that don't look right, and then fill in the muscles that I do know. I put the bit on the horse's mouth and then follow the reins to the boy's hand, to the arm, the chest, and then the neck and the head. As I color in the patch of blue sky and puffy clouds behind the rider, coins start to rain down on me. When I finish, I scramble around the sandy feet in flip-flops collecting quarters and dimes, smiling up at the turistas at the same time. I'm reaching for a dollar bill when the tip of a black shoe pins it to the sidewalk. I tug hard, but the shoe won't let go. Mi peso, my dollar, I yell at the man on the other end of the shoe. I wonder why someone would be wearing a black suit at the beach. How could I be so careless? I glance up and see the badge and a name tag pinned to his lapel. It says, Officer Ramirez. I'm in trouble. ¿Cómo te llamas? Ramirez asks and takes out a little notebook. Jorge, I mutter. Jorge, he asks and then lifts his foot. I fold the bill into my pocket. Si, Jorge. And where do you live, Jorge? I hesitate for a moment. The foster home on 10th Street, I say, hoping I got it right. I know that place. I bet you came with Pedro Pan, right? See, that's what it said on the name tag. What's your last name, Jorge? He asks. But I can't think of a name. He taps on his notebook with his pencil. Last name, he says patiently. Gonzalez, I mumble. I can feel myself turning red. The other man in the dark sedan, parked at an odd angle to the curb, calls out, Hey, Ramirez, I'm hungry. Ramirez snaps his notebook shut, then waves it at me. Muy bien, Jorge Ramirez Gonzalez. I'll check this out. Ramirez is halfway to the car when he turns around and lifts up his sunglasses so I can see his eyes. Cuídate, cubanito. Ramirez Gonzalez. He caught me by surprise. I should have had it all worked out. But I guess it really doesn't matter what name I gave him. When he checks at the foster home, he'll know. Then he'll come looking for me. As I pull my cart down the road, I tell myself that the next time I'll be ready. I'll see Ramirez before he sees me, and then dump the cart and run. He'll never catch me. But it's a shame that I won't be able to come back here. Just one picture and I have enough money to make 2 phone calls, with some left over for Tomas. The only place that I can think of where it'll be safe to draw is the hotel. Maybe if I can talk to the monkey man, he'll let me draw by the pool. As I walk to the bus, I duck into the first phone booth I pass and try my father's office number. The man who answers the phone recognizes my father's name, but then he announces that the only reason he knows the name is because it's printed in gold on the door. Do you know where he could be? How could I know that? I never met the man, he says, and then he hangs up. The next number on the list has been disconnected. I've made 3 calls and nothing. This is a lot harder than I thought it would be. Monster Engine. I climb up the ladder and find the deck littered with wires and greasy engine parts. We'll turn her over as soon as I get this nice and tight, Dog yells from inside the engine compartment. He's tightening the 4 bolts at the bottom of the carburetor. Tomas is standing by the wheel. Hola, Julian, he says. Dog looks up with a lopsided smile creeping across his face, and I notice that his canines are very pointy. They're too long for a human, or even a dog, but not for a wolf. What are you looking at? He grunts at me. Oh, nothing. I must have been staring. Pass me that wrench by your foot, he says. What are you doing? I ask as I kick it over. I got Tomas some new parts for his engine, Dog says. Dog, you know as well as I do those parts are used, Tomas yells back. Almost new, Dog barks. Tomas turns toward me. He thinks just because he puts them in boxes he found in back of a garage, I'll pay him for new parts. He laughs. I wasn't born yesterday, Dog. Now that we're on the subject, Dog says as he climbs out of the engine compartment, I gotta get out of the river before the tide changes. If you got my money. Sure, I'll go get it, Tomas says and then steps into the cabin. I watch Dog walk to the wheel. There's something about him that I don't like. Something that I don't trust. He's checking out Tomas's compass. I hear him say under his breath, this is a mighty tight piece of equipment. Then he leans in to study the bolts holding it in place. He must have sensed that I was watching him because he whips around and locks me in his yellowy wolf eyes. Why are you looking at me like that? He growls, low so that Tomas can't hear him. If I were you, I wouldn't go around sticking my nose where it doesn't belong. Just then, Tomas comes out with a money can and starts counting out a handful of bills. Now, this compass was bought new, right? Dog says, changing his tone. Tomas hands him the money. That's my pride and joy. Must have cost you a pretty penny, too. Dog comments as he slowly inspects it from his shiny dome down to the 4 bolts securing it behind the wheel. I can still count on you for the trip, right? We'll leave on the 11th. Sure, Tomas. As long as you can pay, you can count on me. I wait for Dog to start up the outboard motor on his skiff to ask Tomas, why do you trust Dog? Why not? I wouldn't trust that guy. I don't like him. I don't have to trust him, Julian. You heard him. I just have to make sure I can pay him. I saw him checking out your compass. What if he steals it? Julian, I've been around boats all my life, and I've met a lot of guys like Dog. I know he's not my friend, but he's not a crook. Tomas is sounding angry. Sorry, Tomas, but I have this feeling. You can't go around calling people crooks just because you have a feeling. There's just something about him. I would never trust a guy like that. He looks like a wolf to me. Oh, I see. It's because the way he looks. Tomas is laughing at me. Just pass me that wrench, please. We stayed up late, trying to put in the new used parts. When I finally tumbled into bed, I was so tired that I didn't even bother to wash up. Why wash up if you're just going to get dirty again? As I drift off, I can hear Tomas still tinkering with the carburetor up on deck. He's determined to get the engine started tomorrow. I wake up to the roar of the engine. The ribs and bones of the boat are shaking. The bunk is vibrating. All hands on deck, Tomas yells. When I stumble out, there's a cloud of exhaust hanging over the deck, but the engine is quiet. You see the red wires by the wheel? When I give you the signal, connect them. Red to red, he says. I stub my toe on a bucket of nails and then limp to the bundle of red and white wires slithering out from behind the peeling dashboard. Tomas makes his final adjustments, then calls out, Fire her up! A yellow and blue spark flies across the gap between the red wires as Tomas scrambles over the groaning engine, feeding it gas, adjusting the screws. Try it again, he says. The engine spews out blue smoke and then dies. I watch Tomas trying to adjust the carburetor. That carburetor looks older than the one that we had on our boat, and Bebo said that it was ready for the trash heap. Tomas doesn't look up. I can't figure out why Tomas can't see the wolf in Dog's face. He might be smart about inventing machines that bounce tomatoes around and fixing up boats, but he sure isn't too smart about people. Get back to the wires. We're almost ready, Tomas says. I grab the bundle of wires and he yells, "Go ahead." When I connect the red wires, the engine roars to life. It's running rough, like it's about to shake itself into 1,000 pieces. "She's gonna blow! Shut her off," Tomas yells. I pull the wires apart and the engine sputters and dies. "Great! Did you hear that?" Tomas sings as he dances around the table. "It won't be long now." Armando's surprise. It took a few days, but I convinced Monkey Man to let me draw on the path to the beach. The only problem is that I have to give him half of the money I collect. It made me mad at first because I'm doing all the work, but I have no choice. Ramirez never comes here. Today I drew a picture of a big marlin fish jumping and a tiny fisherman, half its size, looking determined to pull the big fish into the boat. It looks just like the one painted on the plate that I broke. The tourists seemed to like it, so I went to the other side of the pool and drew another one. After I collect the dimes, quarters, and nickels, I go find the Monkey Man. He insists that I empty my pockets in front of him so that he can count the money himself. "Do you think I would cheat you?" I say. "Wouldn't you?" he says. As he counts the money, I realize that I did the same thing to Dog. That's why Tomas got mad at me. I guess I just assumed he looked like a crook. But still, I think I'm right about Dog, and the Monkey Man is wrong about me. Monkey Man counts and then divides it up. He stacks most of the coins on his side. "I need the coins to make change," he says, as he gives me a few coins and 2 $1 bills. I scoop up half of the money and count the change. I have enough to make one short call. When he leaves, I sneak around to the phone booth and sit down inside. I look over my numbers, trying to decide which one to call. On the back cover of my notebook, I find a number written in a different hand than my mother's. Now I remember that Beba wrote that number down on the last day that I talked to him in the kitchen. It's his mother's number. He said he was going to stay with her while he was waiting for school to start. 1, 2, 3, 4 rings. I think he said that his mother lived in the country. 5, 6, that she had a garden. 7, 8, 9, maybe he's... Hola! Bebo! I can't believe it. You're the first one. The only one. Is that really you? This is really me. But the question is, who are you? You don't recognize my voice? It's good to hear you. Julian, amigo, ¿qué dices? I didn't recognize you. You sound all grown up. What are those Yankees feeding you? Oh, you know, meatloaf, oatmeal, American food. It's good to hear Bebo laugh even if he's 90 miles away. Bebo, have you seen my parents? Chico, the last time I saw them was 2 weeks ago. I went to your father's office to get some things I left behind. He was moving out. Did he say where he was going? See, he said he was going to San Miguel. They're staying in a house that we built. The guy he built it for left the country. Did he leave a number, I ask? No, he said there's no phone there. No phone? I can't believe it. How am I going to get in touch with him? I could take a bus there. What do you need to tell them? You would do that for me, Bebo? Of course, you're my friend, Julian. You would do the same thing for me. Tell them to go to... But then I stop. When I remember Tomas telling me that sometimes people listen in on calls. I rehearsed what I was going to say, but I imagined I was going to say it to my mother. What if I say something wrong and I'd get Bebo in trouble? Take your time, Julian. I understand, Bebo says calmly. I think he does understand. Bebo could always read my mind. Tell them that Mommy's little bird is in Reglas, and if she wants it, she has to take the first ferry there on the 12th. That's all I need, Julian. You don't have to say anything else. I'll take care of it today. You can call me back tomorrow at the same time. So how are your brothers? Bebo asks, changing the subject, but before I can answer, I hear a click, and the operator comes on to ask for more money. I know that I have no more quarters, but I search my pockets anyway. Then I hear the dial tone, and I know he's gone. As I walk back to Armando's tent, I don't know whether to feel happy or worried. What if Bebo doesn't find them? What if they say no? What if they say yes? What if they get caught? What if the boat sinks? My brain is stuttering to an endless list of what-ifs. I sit down in the shade of the tent. Inside, I can hear Armando talking, but I don't pay attention, because he's always talking to himself, reciting facts or repeating words over and over like a Cuban parrot. Then I hear Tomas's angry voice. I need your share for the gas. I peek inside and Tomas is standing over Armando, with his fists clenched. Look, Tomas, I told you already. I can't do anything about it. His novia does not want to come, and my brother would not leave without her. Tomas looks like he's going to hit Armando. You promised. You gave your word. I close the flap. Now I'm convinced that I can't say anything about my phone call. I have to wait. When I look inside, Armando's frantically searching through his notes. Ah, Jess, here it is. When a door closes, a window opens. Tomas whirls around. This is what I think of your window that opens. He pulls the notes off the tent, crumples them up, and throws them out the window. Everyone else gave me their money already. His voice is scary calm. I let you go until the end because I trusted you. But I need every nickel that was promised. You know that I can't make the trip without it. Sorry, amigo, but I've already spent that money. Armando whispers as if he's letting us in on a big secret. English lessons. Then he announces cheerfully, they start next week. Tomas is rocking from side to side. It looks like he can't decide whether to rush Armando or turn around and leave. I step inside and stand in between him and Armando. Tomas, I have some money, I say, and then dig my bills out of my pocket. Here, this is for you. I have more on the boat. Tomas puts his hand down, opens his fist, and I push the money into his hand. Tomas looks at the folded bills. Thank you, Julian. But I'll need a lot more than this. I gently push him outside. I have more on the boat. Let's go home. When we step out into the sand, he exhales and stares at the sea. I can feel him trying to push his anger out to the blue horizon, so it can float away with the ivory clouds. He inhales slowly and says, I have to find a way. Patching. We're sitting in a booth at Pirate Angels. Tomas is working his numbers on a napkin. Without Armando's share, it's going to be really close, he says, and then crosses out all the numbers and starts again. Dr. De La Vega is balancing a knife on his finely tapered but pruny fingers. Tomas, I've given you everything I have. His boss, Mr. Papanapaloolis, twists the ends of his bushy mustache and asks, How much? We need a life raft, spare park plugs, and cables. Then I have to fill both tanks. Tomas writes a figure on a napkin and hands it to him. That's a lot of money, he says, and then scratches the gray stubble on his chin. When we come to this country from Greece, many people help. That's why I hire the doctor. He's a lousy dishwasher, but someday he'll be a great doctor. We all need to help sometimes, so I give you 25. But that's all. And if my wife finds out, I give you our house money. He pulls his index finger across his throat. Tomas shakes his hand. Thank you. I'll pay you back as soon as I can. The doctor puts his arm around his boss. This is a good man, amigo. When I get my doctor's license, I promise to operate on any organ you want, for free. Then he plants a loud smacking kiss on top of his shiny head. Mr. Papanapaloolis quietly chews on the end of his mustache, contemplating the offer as he starts walking back to the kitchen. When he sees that the doctor is still sitting in the booth, he bangs on the counter. Back to work, he roars. Remember, in Miami there are many doctors that want to wash dishes. As the doctor gets up, he slips a ring from his finger. My wedding ring, he says, as he pushes the ring across the table toward Tomas. You said the guy at the pumps would trade jewelry and things for gas. This'll buy you a few gallons. Tomas shakes the doctor's hand. I'll try to talk him into not selling it until I can buy it back, but I can't promise anything. Tomas gets up. Gracias, amigo. Someday I will repay your kindness. The doctor shrugs his shoulders. All we can do is try, he says, and then slides out of the booth. Goodbye, Julian. Tomas is already heading for the door. Goodbye, doctor. Good luck with your tests, I say, and then hurry to catch up with Tomas. It's starting to rain, I yell. But Tomas doesn't answer. He must be juggling miles, dollars, and gallons of gas in his head. And as I run to catch up, I see a dark sedan idling by the curb. The two men inside are looking straight at us. Tomas, I yell. It's Ramirez, the guy in the car. He's a policeman. We gotta run. When he sees the car, Tomas snaps out of his numbers trance and pulls me into the driveway of a used car lot. Caramba, that's all I need now. Now don't look at them. Don't run until I tell you. He whispers as we walk past the sales trailer. Stay low and head for the vans. They won't see us there. We duck down low and run in between the sedans toward the tall vans in the back of the car lot. I can see the back fence, but then a large man in a black plastic raincoat jumps out from behind the van and blocks our path. Hey, what are you doing here? He yells in English. Tomas dives to the right, and I run to the left. Tomas is one step ahead, so the man grabs me instead. I'm kicking and squirming as the giant lifts me up over his head and starts running back to his trailer by the road. From up here I can see over the tops of the vans and the dark sedan just turning into the lot. I look down and Tomas is running toward us with a broom. He pokes the broom handle in between the man's legs. The man stumbles, lets go, and now I'm flying through the air. I land and then bounce back up on my feet. The man is trying to get up, but his legs are tangled up in his raincoat. Tomas throws the broom at him, and then I follow him to the fence. As we negotiate the sharp barbs on top of the chain-link fence, the men in the black suits are jumping over the giant. We twist and slide our way through a tangle of thorny brushes. Ripe and red berries stain our clothes and skin as a squawking blue jay, angry that we've disturbed its banquet, dives and pecks at our heads. We're on the wrong side of the river, Tomas groans. We dive in and start swimming across. Tomas is way ahead of me when the strong current in the middle of the river grabs me. I swim as hard as I can, but I still end up downstream from the boat. Tomas is waiting for me inside the cabin when I trip down the steps, and before I can say anything, he pounds his fist on the counter. You didn't tell me that they were looking for you, Julian. Why? They're not looking for you, Tomas, I say. Julian, if they caught us just now, they would have dragged me in with you. Even if I got away, they would come after me. Why? You didn't do anything. First thing they'll ask you is, where are you living? Tomas waves his hand around the cabin. When they come down here, they'll know right away what I'm up to. If the Coast Guard takes my boat away, what do you think is going to happen to all those people waiting on the dock? I told you right from the beginning, the more people in the chain, the riskier it gets. One little mistake, one weak link, and we all sink. I look away, hoping he won't ask me about my parents. If I told him that I had to leave a message with Bebo, he would see it as one more link in the chain. He wouldn't understand that Bebo is my friend, that I trust him. Tomas doesn't say more than 3 words to me for the rest of the afternoon. We work late into the night, clearing the decks, checking off the things on his list that have to be done before we can leave. He was still up when I went to bed. Rain. In the morning, I step out into the rain and watch the brown waters climbing up the bank. If it keeps raining, the boat will soon float, just as Tomas predicted. Tomas is on the bank hauling his treasures up from under a tarp, making a pile of the things we will need up on deck. Ropes, spare parts, cans, and hoses. Let's get out of the rain, he says, and then guides me down into the cabin. You haven't said anything about your parents. I guess that means that you couldn't find them. Well, maybe they might. Tomas cuts me off. Save it. I don't have time for maybes. You should have said something a long time ago. I'm waiting to hear from them. I don't have time for excuses either. I've got too many other things to worry about. If your parents are at the dock on time, they can come. Then Tomas takes some bills out of the money can and grabs his raincoat. Right now I have to go buy enough gas to get the boat to the pumps, and I'll use the rest to buy some spare parts and fill up the tanks. You stay here while I'm gone. I don't want you getting picked up by that Ramirez guy. But I have one more call to make. And even if he did pick me up, I would never tell him about the boat. I can't take any more chances, he says as he climbs down the ladder. And Julian, when this boat leaves, you have to go back to the camp. But Caballo, I don't want to hear it. The camp is where you belong. Then Tomas starts up the slippery bank. Halfway up, he stops and turns around. And by the way, Dog is coming later in the afternoon. If I'm not back by then, tell him to wait, because we're leaving today, no matter what. I watch Tomas pull himself up the muddy bank and then disappear into the bushes that line the road. I can't be mad at Tomas. He's got a job to do. 14 people are depending on him. He's like Bebo. When he's in a bind, he only thinks about what's in front of him, what he has to do. He doesn't worry about things, good or bad, that put him in that spot. I have a job to do, too. I'll make my call and come right back. Tomas has nothing to worry about. It's too early to make my call, so I go below, open up my suitcase and start folding my damn clothes. When I finish packing, I run my hand along the side where the golden swallow is still sleeping. Just as I close my suitcase, I hear the drone of an outboard motor coming up the river. Dog is maneuvering past the submerged dock to tie his skiff to a log on the bank. I can hear him cursing the slippery mud as he makes his way to the ladder. As I walk out of the cabin, Dog is leaning over the compass and facing away from me. "Hi, Dog," I say, loud enough to startle him. Dog jumps back and turns around to glare at me. "What are you doing here?" he asks as he jams something long and metallic into his pocket. "You're here early, aren't you?" I ask. "I'm just helping my buddy Tomas out. You know, 1,000 things to do to get ready." Dog smiles and then starts fumbling with the wires. "Tomas wanted me to tell you that he's leaving today, no matter what. He wants you to wait for him." "I'm all ready to go," Dog says. Then he grabs a roll of electrical tape. "I better get started wrapping these up. We don't want them to unravel in the middle of the ocean." Standing behind him, I watch him tape up the wires. Maybe I was wrong to assume that he's up to no good. Maybe he's just a guy trying to earn some money to fix up his own boat, like Tomas. Suddenly, Dog turns around. "Don't you have anything better to do?" "Sorry," I say, and then pick up the broom and start sweeping the deck. After I finish the deck, I go down to the cabin to sweep and reorganize the food in the galley. When it's time to go, Dog is still taping up the loose wires. "I've got to go up and make a phone call. I'll be back soon," I say, as I walk past him. Dog looks up and smiles. "You take your time. I'll stand watch." I stop when I see his big yellow canines. "I think I forgot something," I blurt out as I dive back into the cabin. I reach under the counter, grab the money can, take all the bills out, and then jam them in my pocket. As I walk out on deck again, Dog is still smiling. "It's the teeth," I say to myself as I climb up the hill. Bad news. The rain and the tide have raised the river to the third rung on the ladder and waist deep. I wade to shore, then climb up the muddy, slippery bank to the road. Before I step across the bridge, I look up and down the wet road for Ramirez. The coast is clear, so I run all the way to the closest phone, right outside Pirate Angels. I look around again one more time, and then start dialing. When a woman answers, I ask for Bebo. "He's out fixing a car," she says. "This is Julian. Did he say when he will be back?" "Si. Hola, Julian. He had an emergency repair out on the highway, but he left a message for you, just in case he didn't get back in time." I hear the clunk of the receiver being set down, then the shushing of her sandals on the tiles. "Here it is. He wrote it down." I can hear her mumbling, mouthing the words before she reads them. "They were there, but now they're not." She reads each syllable slowly. "Sorry, Bebo." "There has to be more," I say. "That's all he wrote," she says. "I have nothing left," I say, and then hang up. What's the use? The rain is coming down in sheets when I step outside. The soaking rain is pushing me down and my shirt feels like it's made out of lead. I feel like I have nothing left to push back with. I must have been crazy to believe that it would work, that someone like me could make something this big and important happen. I'm standing ankle deep in a puddle that looks as big as a sea. The reflection of the pirate angel sign is flashing in the shallow water. Even upside down, the lady pirate's face reminds me of Angelita. I can almost feel her hand reaching out to me. Suddenly, the red reflection shatters into 1,000 little rubies as a car skids to a stop right in front of me. A man jumps out of the dark sedan, but I can't run. My legs have turned to wood. He grabs my arm and pulls me to the car, but he's having a hard time folding my wooden body into the back seat. The driver is getting annoyed. Ramirez, do I have to do everything myself? It's not my fault, boss. He won't bend. Ramirez answers, and then he says to me, Mira, chico, a little cooperation. We're here to help you. The camp called us when you ran away. Your mother is here. She's worried sick about you. We're here to take you back. Mi madre? He must be talking about someone else's mother. My mother disappeared. She's never at the other end of the line when I call. Vamos, niño. Your mother's waiting for you. Ramirez croons as he pulls me gently into the back seat. How do I know he's not saying that just to get me into the car? As I slide into the back seat, his partner turns around. He's holding a piece of paper with what looks like my passport picture on it. That's him, all right, he says, and hands the paper to Ramirez. Ramirez glances at it and then slams the door. Julian, we're taking you back to where you belong. Where I belong? A swirling fog creeps over me, leaving me numb and too tired to lift my arms. Ramirez is leaning over me. ¿Qué dices? When I look at him, I feel like I'm seeing things through a rolled-up newspaper. Little details pop up, like the black hairs bristling out of Ramirez's nose. Then I notice the little birds. I think they're swallows flying on his red tie. The swallow. Red rubies, I say as if I'm in a trance, and Ramirez shakes his head at me. I jerk my head back as if someone has just slapped me awake. My suitcase, I yell, and Ramirez jumps back. Suitcase? Ramirez asks. Tell us where it is. We'll take you there. Take me there? I can't take him to the boat. He'll arrest Tomas and then 14 people will... And then it hits me. I have the gasoline money. All those people are waiting on the dock for Tomas. My mother counting on me to protect the bird so we'll have some money to start a new life. I've let everyone down. The seed is trying to suck me in. I can't let everybody down, I say out loud. Ramirez gives me a strange look. I think we better get him back pronto. He calls out to the driver and then slams the door. There's a man fishing off the bridge, and as we drive by, he turns around. The shape of his head silhouetted against the silver clouds reminds me of Bebo. He would want me to try. He wouldn't just sit back and let things happen. Suddenly, I feel the fog is lifting, and I know exactly what I have to do. Stop the car, I yell as loud as I can. I'm going to be sick, really sick. Ramirez looks at me as if I'm possessed, then slides all the way to the other end of the seat. The driver looks back and then slows down. I push the door open and tumble out of the car. Ramirez is still holding onto my hand. I hit the ground running, but I fall and scrape my knees. Ramirez sees that I'm getting dragged, so he lets go. And Ramirez is running after me, but I reach the bridge first. Climbing up on the railing, I look out over the buzzing highway, the rooftops, and then out to sea. This time, I'm not going to look down. It's only 90 miles to Havana from here, but a very long drop to the muddy water below. Gravity slips. When I jump, Ramirez grabs my foot. Tu madre, he yells. She's waiting. For a second, gravity slips and the blue sky holds me. I'm floating above the river, his words snapping all around me like little banners. Then the water rushes up too soon, and I smack into the river, face first. As I swim downstream on my back, I see Ramirez leaning over the railing, waving my left shoe at me. She's waiting, he yells. If the current wasn't pulling on me so hard, I might have turned around and swum back to the bridge and let Ramirez take me to my mother. But I know that it's just a mean trick that he uses to catch runaways. I can't go back yet. Right now I have to get the gas money and my bird to Tomas, and I have to do it quick. I'm sure Ramirez will be looking for me along the river, and then he'll probably find the boat. The boat is still sitting on top of the refrigerator, but now there's a stream of fast water between the hull and the bank. As I climb up on deck, I see 2 red gas cans that weren't there when I left. Tomas, come out here. Hurry. I call into the cabin and then look up the bank toward the highway. Tomas walks out of the cabin holding the empty money can. It's over, Julian. The gas money is gone. Tomas drops the can and then sits down on the deck. You were right. I shouldn't have trusted him. I shouldn't have trusted anyone. Then he lies down. I dig his roll of bills out of my left pocket. Tomas, he's not a crook. I took the money just in case, I say, and then I hand it to him. Tomas sits up and points back at the wheel. You didn't notice. The shiny brass compass is not behind the wheel. Only the 4 bolts are left. It's gone. You were right. He is a crook. Why did he take it? He told me he has a compass just like it. He probably traded it for a tank of gas, Tomas says, and then lies back down. It's all over. Tomas, you can't give up. We've got to get it back. We'd have to buy it back, Julian, and we barely have enough money for the gas we'll need for the trip. I'm about to sit down next to him when I feel the deck slide and then dip slightly. Did you feel that, I ask? Tomas wipes the rain out of his eyes. Feel what? The deck leans and then rises like a ride at the amusement park. Hey, she's floating, I yell, and run to look over the side. Tomas, the water is halfway up the hull. You were right. We still got a chance. Tomas joins me at the rail. I guess I figured one thing right, but it doesn't really matter. If it was just me, alone, I would try it, but I can't risk 14 lives. It's my fault. My father wanted to teach me to navigate by the stars, but I thought, what do I need the stars when I've got a compass? Tomas, I can't believe you're giving up. I yell and pull on his arm. You said that you would lift the boat up yourself if you had to. It's over, Julian. Now the only thing I can do is to try to get in touch with them, so they won't show up at the dock. Tomas says and then nods towards the cabin. You better go and pick up your clothes. You left them all over the cabin. Go and pack. I'll walk you to the bus stop. Pick up my clothes? I rush into the cabin. My suitcase is open, my jumbled clothes dripping over the sides. Dog. I hope he was just looking for the gas money. I hold my breath as my fingers run along the side of the suitcase, that then slow down near the corner. There's the edge. The blue lining is not cut. The bird is safe, still sleeping in its little compartment. What are you looking for? Tomas asks. My mother's golden swallow. She had it sewn in there before we left. I'm supposed to guard it until my parents get here. Didn't you tell the doctor that you could buy his ring back from the guy at the pump when you got back? You could trade the bird in for your compass. You could get more gas and all the spare parts you'll need. I don't know, Julian. I'm sure your parents are counting on that bird for when they get here. They'll need the money to start over. Tomas, just give me a knife, I say and hold out my hand. The sharp blade slides easily through the silky material. I pull it back, and there it is, a tiny door. When I pry it open, the sleeping bird tumbles out. It's here. It's really here. I pick up my mother's golden swallow and then press it against my cheek. I can smell her perfume, see her teardrop face floating above me, hear her voice when she asks me to guard it for the family. I hope you understand, Mommy, I say, and then hand the bird over to Tomas as fast as I can. Are you sure you want to do this? Tomas asks, as he bounces it in his hands. You said yourself that those people are desperate to get out, and if you don't show up, they'll probably get arrested. You've got 14 people depending on you. I think it's the right thing to do, I say, trying to sound like I'm sure. I wish my mother's face wasn't floating above me, frowning at me. Don't you mean 16? Aren't your parents coming? No, I say, hoping he won't ask why. If I tell him what Ramirez said about my mother being here already, he might not let me go with him. There might be a lot of things that are gray and unclear. But there's one thing I'm sure of. Tomas wouldn't have hired Dog to go with him if he could make the trip alone. He needs me to go with him, and I want to go. Tomas cups the bird in his hands and looks up at the peeling paint on the beams overhead. I admire you for wanting to help, he says. I know how much that bird means to you and your family, but I have no choice. I accept your generous offers, Julian. If there's ever anything I can do for you or your family, just ask. I was waiting for him to say that. Yes, you can do something for me. Let me go with you. Julian, I have to get past the Coast Guard, motor 90 miles in this leaky tub, then sneak into Havana Harbor. No way, it's too dangerous. I know the harbor. That's where my father keeps his fishing boat. Besides, now that dog is out, you'll need someone to help with the engine, I say. Tomas shakes his head and paces across the deck. He leans over the railing to check the swiftly rising water. Tomas, you don't have a choice about this either. I yell and point up at the highway. Ramirez is up there. If we don't leave right now, we might never go. Ramirez is now climbing over the railing, yelling something down at us. Tomas finally looks at me. I guess you're in, he says as Ramirez slips and slides down the muddy bank in his nice black suit. Ready with the bow line, Tomas yells and then starts up the engine. Ramirez is skating on the mud down to the shore as I untie the line from the cleat on the bow. Where are you going? Didn't you hear me? Your mother is waiting for you. Ramirez shouts over the roar of the engine, and then he pulls a piece of paper out of his pocket. This is her letter. He waves an airmail envelope at me. She's at your uncle's house in Connecticut. Now I believe him. It's not a trick. It's really her. I measure the distance from the boat to the shore. It's far, but I'm a good swimmer. Come back, Julian, Ramirez says, tugging gently on the other end of the line. Drop the rope and jump. I'll take you to her. If I drop the rope and jump, this sad feeling that's been living in my chest since I left my family will go away. I know it. But I can't just jump and leave Tomas and those people on the dock. They need me. Tell my mother that I love her. Then I toss my end of the line to Ramirez. Let's get out of here, Tomas yells. The vibration from the engine is buzzing up my legs like electricity as the boat nudges out into the middle of the river. I can feel the churning current pulling on the boat. We've hooked onto something even more powerful than a big fish. As we rush under the bridge where we caught the shrimp, Tomas nudges me. Look who's up there, he says, and points behind us. The black sedan has just stopped on the bridge. The door opens and Ramirez gets out. The old boat is shaking as we speed out of the narrow river and into a choppy sea. Every time we slap into a wave, it creaks and complains as if it's about to fall apart. When we finally reach the gas pumps, Tomas maneuvers the boat up to the dock and jumps down to secure the stern line. Julian, get the bow line. I'll go talk to Pops. We've got to get in and out quick. Ramirez is bound to show up here any minute. When I walk into the marine supply store, an old guy, Pops I guess, is sitting behind the counter, already inspecting the rubies on the wings of the golden swallow. His bushy eyebrows jump halfway up to his leathery forehead as he bounces it in the palm of his hand and says, "Solid." It's worth much money, I say, and wave my hand over the growing pile of spare parts and life preservers that Tomas is hurriedly collecting. Mucho más than this. You're right. This is a mighty fine piece of work. The last time I saw a piece like this, it was in a museum, Pop says. Son, are you sure you want to leave this with me? The tone of his voice makes me think that maybe it's a lot more valuable than even my mother thought it was. But I guess that doesn't matter, because we're trading it for something you can't add or subtract. How can you put a price on 14 people waiting on a dock? Tomas comes back with a rubber raft and used compass cradled in his arms. This stuff and 2 tanks of gas is all we need, he says. But you have to promise to give me 1 month to make the money to buy it back. Tomas, you know me. I never promise nothing, but I always do my best. He chuckles and then shuffles out to the pumps. While Pops fills the gas tanks, I bolt the used compass back on behind the wheel and try to keep an eye out for Ramirez at the same time. Tomas puts away the spare parts and then disappears into the cabin. I make sure the compass is secure and then go below. Tomas is bending over a chart, pointing at the end of a familiar chain of islands hooking south from the tip of Florida. This is where we'll wait, he says. That's Key West. It's 90 miles to Havana from there, I say, and Tomas looks up, surprised. We had a chart just like this one on our boat, I explain. Bebo was teaching me how to read it before we left. Why do we have to wait? We can't wait here. Ramirez might just show up any minute, but if we leave now, we'll get to Havana too early. We'll motor south, keeping the Keys close to the west. That way, if anything happens, we'll be close enough to duck in and make repairs. Tomas runs his finger over the empty blue space between Key West and the north coast of Cuba. Then we'll cross the Florida Straits, 90 miles of open water. If the engine holds together, it should take 15 hours each way. Tomas narrows his eyes and looks at me as if he's measuring me. Nothing but that old engine, this leaky boat, and this, he says, pointing at his forehead, between us and that deep blue sea. Comprende? I nod. Good. We make the jump tomorrow morning, before the sun comes up. No turning back, Tomas says as he looks for signs of doubt or fear in my face. He wants to be sure he can count on me. I'm excited and afraid at the same time. I'm not sure which one he'll see on my face, so I turn away. No turning back, I say. Good, he says, and points me toward the cabin. Now go below and get some rest. I don't want you falling asleep at the wheel. The Pirate's Channel. When I open my eyes, the cabin is hazy. Blue smoke is pouring in. I cough and then stumble up to the empty deck. The moon is still out, but to the east, delicate pink clouds are promising a beautiful sunrise. Tomas is bending into a cloud of exhaust billowing out of the idling engine. Did you stay up all night, I yawn? See, I wanted to put in all the new parts, he says, and then shakes his head. It's too bad that Pops didn't have a carburetor. This one is over the hill. Then he opens a rusty folding chair, sets it up next to the engine, and pats the seat. It's going to take a lot of tinkering and adjusting to keep this old man running, Tomas says. Now we'll see how much your friend Bebo taught you about engines. I pull a dime from my pocket, reach around the carburetor, and adjust the hidden screw. The engine is idling a little smoother now, and not smoking as much, but if I had just the right paperclip, I could make it run smoother. Good job, Tomas says, then gently pushes the throttle forward, steering south of Key West into the open ocean. The sun has just cleared the horizon when the engine coughs once and then dies. I jiggle the wires to see if one is loose, then I tap the carburetor with my screwdriver, and surprise, the engine starts. For the rest of the morning, I sit by the engine like a doctor caring for a patient with a mysterious illness. I use anything I can find in the toolbox and around the boat to keep the old engine running. The nice white tape from the first aid kit wraps around a leaky hose. The spring from a ballpoint pen keeps the throttle open. I bend the metal link, cartridge, and it works almost as well as a paperclip when it isn't slipping off. I use a coffee can which I cut open to cover a hole in the rusty exhaust pipe, and chewing gum to plug up a crack in the distributor. Tomas is amazed. I would never have thought of that, he laughs. In between emergencies, I keep busy checking and then tightening the nuts and bolts that the engine shook loose. And by the end of the day, the engine is running smoother than ever. So I sit down in my folding chair to rest and watch the sun set. Did Bebo teach you all those tricks? Tomas asks. Some, I say, but most of them I had to make up myself. He did teach me a lot of tricks, but the most important thing he taught me was how to think for myself and how to invent. Now it's my turn to teach you a thing or two, Tomas says, as I follow him to the compass. Bebo taught me how to find north, south, east, west, and what the points in between were called. He didn't have time to explain how to find your bearings and then how to keep the boat on the right headings, but Tomas is as good an explainer as Bebo. Everything he says makes sense to me. When he finishes, Tomas takes off his blue captain's cap. She's all yours, Captain, he says, and then slaps the cap down on my head. Keep your eyes on the water and the lights off. We don't want the Coast Guard to spot us. Now it's my turn to get some rest. Gripping the wheel with both hands, I check the compass and then listen to the engine purr. I might have to stand up on my tiptoes to see over the deck, but on this watch, I'm wearing the cap. I'm the captain. As I watched the dark sea roll by, I realized that I never used the important things that Bebo taught me. Before my brothers left me alone, I was just like a balloon on a string, tagging along behind them. I let them decide, solve, and think for me. Out here in the dark, if I listen past the drone of the engine, I can feel the big silence rushing by, and I can hear myself think. Maybe my brothers were making too much noise for me to hear my own thoughts. When the moon peeks out from behind the clouds, threads of sparkling gems shimmer on the wake of the boat. I lean over the side to get a closer look. Suddenly, a rubbery black wall rises out of the sea, close enough to touch. I jump back as a peaceful eye, the size of a garbage can lid, slides by. It is staring at me as it dips under the waves. Then I hear the sound of rushing water and bells. I look up just in time to see the bow of a freighter bearing down on us. "Big ship," I yell, and turn the wheel as hard as I can to the right. Tomas runs up as the rusty hull churns by. "I told you to keep your eyes on the water," he says as he inspects the stern of the freighter. "I did," I gasp. "I saw a whale, and it was looking right at me." "Sorry, Tomas. I got distracted. It won't happen again. I promise," I say. I take the cap off and hand it back to him. "It's my fault. I should have warned you. This is a shipping channel, and even if they were looking, they can't see us with our lights off." Tomas points at barely visible lights twinkling low on the horizon. "Look, I think that's Havana. 2 more hours and we'll be there." As we get closer, the lights separate into a cluster of city lights, and then a single bright one to the left. "That is Havana," I say. "The light to the left is El Morro." Tomas checks his watch. "It took us longer to get here than I thought it would. All the fishing boats are back in the harbor already. If we go in now, the light will pick us up. Then they'll send a boat out to check us out." "We can wait out here," I suggest. Tomas shakes his head. "It's too deep to anchor here, and if I shut down the engines, we'll drift too far." "I know how we can get into the harbor without the light picking us up. There's a channel right next to the cliffs. It will take us under the light. My father told me about the pirates and smugglers that used it all the time to avoid the light and sneak into the harbor." "Are you sure?" Tomas asks. "Yes, we used that channel when we left the harbor to go fishing." "All right then," Tomas says as he steps aside. "This is your home port. Take us in." Keeping the boat outside the reach of El Morro's roving beam, I head for the beach to the left of the harbor. Then, with the engine idling, I glide into the dark channel between the slick black rocks and the stonework of the old Spanish fort. "Go slow," Tomas whispers. "I can't see a thing." In the shadow of the light, I can't see the cliff either, but I can feel it. Just like Bebo taught me, I steer by the sound of the engine bouncing off the black walls. When we slide out of the channel and into the harbor, Tomas slaps me on the back and puts the captain's cap back on my head. "It's yours. You've earned it. Now, find us a place to anchor near the Reglas ferry." "No problem," I say, and steer toward the fishing boats moored by the ferry dock on the east side of the harbor. As Tomas carefully slips the anchor into the water, I cut the engine and nudge into a cluster of boats. "Let's go below and wait," he whispers. Jump. The sunrise is just starting to paint the tops of the buildings pink and gold when the ferry starts up her engines. We've been awake all night. When we heard the fishermen rowing out to their boats, we went up on the deck and started getting ready. Tomas is looking out toward the dock using a plastic toy telescope he found in the trash. Just as the ferry heads across the bay, he hands me the telescope. "There they are. Look." I scan the crowd on the dock across the bay. I can't tell who is who. They all look like they're waiting for the ferry. Right. This is the only way I could think of to get 14 people and their luggage on the dock at the same time without the police getting suspicious. "Yeah, but what will the ferry captain say when they don't get on?" I ask. "The ferry captain is on a tight schedule. He won't have time to get too curious. We'll swing by right after the ferry leaves." As the ferry glides into the dock, A group of men, women, and children, each carrying a small suitcase, starts walking slowly down the long wooden ramp. 14. They're all there, I say, and then hand the telescope to Tomas, but he waves it away. Start her up, he yells. The engine coughs and wheezes, but it will not start. I grab the screwdriver, try tapping the carburetor, but that doesn't work. Then I jiggle a couple of wires, and the engine finally starts up. Give me everything she's got, Tomas yells. As we chug across the harbor, Tomas waves at the captain of the ferry on his return trip. Then he cuts the wheel. My heart is thumping as we jump over the wake of the ferry. This is it, Tomas yells, and draws a sharp curve toward the fast-approaching dock. When he gives me the signal, I slow the engine to an idle, and then run up to the bow. We slam into the rubber bumpers, and Tomas yells, "Secure the bow line!" I'm about to jump off when I see a man on the dock wearing a white guayabera shirt. He must be with our group, so I throw him the rope. The rope hits him on the chest. He grabs it as it falls. Tomas is counting heads and helping the women and children step into the boat. I turn away when I hear the man on the dock say, "I can't hold this." I call to the man, "Just hold it until we're ready to go. Then you can jump on. We won't leave you behind." He's holding the rope like he's posing for a picture. Tomas helps the last couple aboard, his parents, shakes his father's hand. "I'm so proud of you, son." His mother gathers them all in her arms, and they spin slow like they're dancing to the thump of the idling engine. I can imagine how good that feels. Then Tomas peels himself away. "We'll catch up later," he says. "Papa, get everyone into the cabin. Julian, we're ready to release the bow line." "Quick, throw me the line. Get on board," I yell to the man on deck. But he's not moving. "Hey, let go." I pull on the line, but the man pulls back. "Julian, who's that guy?" Tomas asks. "Isn't he with us?" "No, we've got all our people," he answers. And then he says to the man in the white guayabera, "Hombre, let go of the rope, now." But the man would not let go. "Let go of the rope, please," I ask nicely. "I can't," the man yells. "I know what you're doing. If someone sees me, they'll think I was helping you escape." "Come with us, then." "Julian, get back to the throttle," Tomas orders. "We're ready to go. If he wants to hang on, that's up to him." "Why don't you come with us? There's room," I say to the man. "How could I?" he cries as he hopped from one foot to the other. "My family. I don't even have my toothbrush." I can tell he wants to come. "I wish I hadn't missed my ferry," he says. "Come with us. You might not get another chance." I feel sorry for him. He probably got up today, just like every day, thinking about his morning coffee or maybe his job. He was definitely not thinking about leaving on a boat with a bunch of strangers. "Julian, someone's coming. Get the throttle," Tomas yells again. I run back to the engine compartment, leaving the man holding the line. "Don't worry about him. He'll either let go or end up in the water. Crank it up. We gotta get out of here." Tomas steers away from the dock, but then the boat stops. I give it a little more gas, the engine strains, coughs once, and then dies. I run back to the bow and find a man in a guayabera standing next to the big steel cleat, and our line is now tied to it. Tomas connects the ignition wires again and the engine groans. "Julian, someone's coming," Tomas yells. A man dressed in a tan uniform is walking down the ramp. He says something to the guy in the white guayabera and bends over to untie the boat. When he stands up, I yell, "Bebo!" "Hola, Julian. Didn't expect to see me here, did you?" Bebo smiles. Then he says calmly, "You don't want to make too much noise. Somebody might be watching." "It's good to see you, Bebo," I say as Tomas runs up behind me. "I've heard a lot about you. I'm Tomas," Tomas says, looking around nervously. "Mucho gusto, amigo," Bebo says and then nods towards Tomas. Then he turns to me and smiles. "Good news, Julian. Your mother left for Miami a week ago. I'd love to catch up with you, but you better get out of here before someone sees you." Bebo reaches into his shirt pocket and pulls out his special paperclip. "Here, from the sound of that engine, you're gonna need this." I hold the paperclip as if it's made of gold. "Thanks, Bebo." "Don't mention it. Now you better get that engine started. If they catch you here, we'll all go to jail." Then Bebo turns around and starts walking up the ramp. "Bebo, do you want to come with us?" Bebo turns around and smiles. "Chico, I told you already. They're cooking the omelet just the way I like it. Then Tomas shouts, "Hey, Julian, we gotta get out of here." When I turn back, Bebo's gone. As I fit the paperclip into the barrel of the carburetor, I feel an emptiness in my heart. I pry the butterfly open so that the right amount of air mixes with the gasoline vapors. That feeling in my heart has been there all this time. The engine sputters, coughs, and starts up. I guess it's like gasoline. It just sits there until you mix it with air, and then it burns. "Thanks, Bebo," I call out. Up on the deck, the man in the white guayabera has picked up the rope again, and he's doing a little shuffling dance, trying to decide whether he should stay or go. A few of our passengers have come up on deck. They're calling out reasons why he should come with us, as Tomas steers the boat away from the dock. Suddenly, the man throws the rope down as if it's a poisonous snake. Then he runs across the dock, and he doesn't stop at the edge. He jumps, his arms and legs spinning in slow motion like he's swimming in air. He has just made the biggest decision of his life, and he's definitely not thinking about landing. Heroes. 10 miles south of Key West, the old engine thumps its last. Even Tomas's father can't get it started. We're drifting out to sea, but we're not giving up. Tomas and his father are pulling up pieces of the wooden deck to make a mast. Two of the women and I are collecting shirts and skirts to button and sew together with copper wire to make a sail. Then we see the Coast Guard cutter. As the Coast Guard tows us in, everyone on the boat is laughing and crying. One by one, the men and the women come over to hug Tomas and I, promising to one day repay our kindness. One woman says that she's going to name her first son Julian Tomas, so that no one will ever forget what we've done. It's late by the time we get to the Coast Guard station in Miami. I'm standing at the railing, looking down at the dock crowded with policemen, when Tomas walks up to join me. He nods at a newscaster pointing a microphone at a large man who's gesturing theatrically toward our sinking boat. "Do you see who that is?" Tomas asks. "That's Armando. What's he doing here?" "I hate to admit it, but I think he probably saved our lives," Tomas says. "What do you mean?" "The captain of the cutter told me that they got a call to go out and look for us. Armando was the only person who knew about our trip. Knowing Armando, he called the TV station and gave them the story to make himself look good, hoping that they'd give him a job as a newsman. He knows that when a TV station gets a tip like that, they'll always call the police, and then the police call the Coast Guard." A small crowd has gathered around Armando. Flashbulbs pop as he answers questions and poses for the camera. Tomas shakes his head and laughs. "Look at him, strutting around the dock like the hero." "He looks like a big rooster to me," I say. "Well, that big rooster probably saved our lives," Tomas says and puts his hand on my shoulder. "But if it wasn't for your gold bird and your help with the engine, I could never have made the trip. The best part of it is that you did it because it was the right thing to do." Then he nods at Armando. "He did it for different reasons. It's funny how things worked out." When they finally let us walk down the ramp, Ramirez is waiting for me on the dock. "First a runaway, now a hero," he says, and then he grabs my wrist and leads me to the car. "No detours today, right?" "No detours. I just want to go home. And I'm not a hero." "Tell that to the 15 people back there on the dock," Ramirez says, and then locks the door. On the way back to the camp, we drove through the same neighborhood we passed on the first day. The houses, trees, the red tricycle, even the wooden sign at the gate were all the same. Everything out there had stayed the same, but I knew that I had changed. When we got to the camp, the car door opened, and a pair of beefy red hands reached in and pulled me out. I grabbed onto the door handle, thinking that it might be Caballo, but the smell of mashed potatoes and the stained apron put me at ease. Dolores pushed me into the kitchen. "This is your lucky day," she said as she slid a plate of steaming meatloaf under my nose. When I told her that I missed her meatloaf, she puffed up proud. "It is good. Good enough for the president and the first astronaut," she said with a mysterious smile on her face. "Did the president remember? Did he call?" She put her finger to her lips. "Shh, shh, it's all hush-hush, top secret." Dolores sat down next to me as I stuffed chunks of meatloaf into my mouth. She told me about how our little revolution turned out. She said that Marta and Angelita had called every number on their list. At first, nothing happened, but they didn't give up. They made another list, collected more dimes, and kept calling until they finally found someone who could help. Dolores laughed and slapped the table. Things started to change around here real quick after that, and before old Caballo knew what hit him, he was on his way to that orphanage in Denver. Isn't that where my brothers are? I asked. It would be a sad day for them to have Caballo follow them there. That's where they were, she said. I heard they left last week and went to live with your uncle up in Connecticut. I'm sure the police told you that your mother's there too. Then Dolores dug into her apron pocket and handed me 3 letters. Here, letters from your brothers. They came in while you were away. Thank you, Dolores, I said as I leafed through the letters. Don't thank me. Angelita collected them and then gave them to me before she left to go live with her brother. Then Dolores looked up at the clock and said, Now, if I were you, I'd go see if I could find my old friends before I hang an apron on you. I gotta get dinner ready. As I stepped out into the dusty yard, Ramirez was just getting into his car. Hey, Cubanito, he yelled as the car started to drive off. Stop, I heard him say to the driver. What's the hurry? I want to say goodbye to my friend. I ran up to the car and we shook hands. Julian, thanks for letting me catch you, he laughed, and then took his sunglasses off. Cases like yours are what make my job worthwhile. I just wish they all worked out as well, he said, and the car started moving again. I guess it's goodbye for now. Maybe I'll see you in Havana next year. I waved goodbye thinking about Lucia, the girl who sold hats and made drawings for the tourist. I wondered if she ever saved up enough money for her mother's plane ticket. Besides Dolores, Ramirez was the only familiar face I found in the camp. The dormitory, dusty baseball field, and the pool were crowded with new kids. Where did they find all these new kids? And what did they do with the old ones? A group of girls were sitting around a picnic table, weaving fancy palm hats with swans swimming on top. I walked over, hoping to find Marta there. I asked who taught them how to make the hats, and they said that it was a girl named Raquel, who had left a week ago. Marta probably taught Raquel, and then she taught these girls. I sat on the shed roof reading my brother's letters. The first letter was about snowfalls that buried the windows and doors, trapping them inside with nuns that smelled like mothballs. The second one told about the tricks they had to learn and the things they had to do just to avoid getting into fights. Aquilino described it best. It is very important to avoid fights, as the inmates here are big and dangerous. The last letter announced that Caballo had gotten beaten up on the first day there. Now he follows us everywhere we go, Gordo wrote. This morning I woke up and there was Caballo sitting next to our bunks with that weird smile on his face. Now he wants to be our friend. And yesterday he returned your dumb drawing book. I had barely finished the last letter when I heard someone calling my name, telling me to get ready. It was the new director. I haven't even unpacked, I answered. If you don't mind flying alone to Connecticut, you can leave today. Of course not. I've flown before, I said as if I had done it 1,000 times. I'm feeling very grown up when I board the airplane all alone. I'm not scared at all. When we land in Connecticut, I find a man holding up a cardboard sign with my name on it. I introduce myself to him. Welcome to Connecticut. I'm Mr. Mooney, he says. And then he tries to grab my suitcase. When I won't let go, he says, Independent little guy, aren't you? As he drives out of the airport, Mr. Mooney tells me how lucky I am that my uncle was willing to take our whole family, even though he has 4 kids of his own. Some kids are not as lucky, you know. I know, I say, thinking about Lucia and all the other kids that disappeared from the camp. I hope they're all back with their own families. You're going to live in a brand new neighborhood, Mr. Mooney announces, as we turn into a freshly paved road. At the bottom of the hill, there are gray foundations rising out of the mud. Near the top, the framed houses without shingles or siding look just like bird cages made of yellow sticks. On the other side of the hill, the houses are all finished, and all the houses are the same. They all have a green patch of lawn in the front, but each one is painted a different color. Why would they build the same house over and over again, I wonder? This is it, Mr. Mooney announces. My stomach starts to jump as he slows down. Connecticut. The woman standing in the middle of my uncle's living room, holding a vacuum cleaner, looks a lot like my mother. But I'm not sure. I've never seen my mother near a vacuum cleaner. Maybe that's why I can't recognize her. Or maybe I just got too good at forgetting. Julian, the woman yells, drops the vacuum cleaner, and then throws her arms around me. I bury my head in the soft place at the base of her neck. My mother's warmth and the waves of perfumed hair crumble the sandcastle walls I had built around her memory. Now I'm home and swimming in her warm sea again, barely aware that my brothers are standing in the doorway. They come closer to poke and measure me, and then grudgingly declare that I did grow a little. But they're just looking at my skin, the outside of me. Safe with my mother and brothers around me, I feel like I've been holding my breath for a long time, and now I can finally exhale. But I can still feel something hard and brittle around my heart. I think that's the shell I had to grow to be able to make it through all that time I was alone. I think it's going to take a long time to melt that shell. When my younger cousins come thumping and tumbling down the stairs, they jump around Alcalino and Gordo, begging to be picked up and spun around. My brothers have grown too. Alcalino has more black wires growing out of his chin, and Gordo has an angry red scar on his forearm. I'm sure they have a lot of stories to tell, and as they bounce and toss the cousins between them, I wonder if my brothers have that little hard place inside of them too. My mother is smiling. She doesn't seem to hear the high, anxious note that the vacuum cleaner is now singing as it tries to swallow my aunt's new drapes. "Where's Papi?" I ask, and her smile tightens. "They didn't let him out." "Why?" "He's building a hospital and they won't let him leave until he finishes." "When is he coming?" "I don't know, Julian, but we're all trying to get him out as fast as possible." "Now come see your room," she says, and leads me downstairs. The large bed in the too small room leaves barely enough space to squeeze around it. I'm picturing myself stretching out alone in the big bed when she says, "You'll sleep here with your brothers. There's plenty of room for all of you. Now, let's open up your suitcase." "Don't you want to know where I went? Aren't you curious about what I did?" I say, hoping that I can at least get a chance to explain before she finds out. "Of course, Julian, but first," she points at the bed. I swallow hard, swing the suitcase up on the bed, and then open it. She picks up the cracked plate sitting on top of a tangled knot of damp clothes. As her fingers worry the rough edges of the hole in the middle, where the fish should be, a tear crawls down her cheek. "You gave this to Papi for Father's Day, remember?" "I was missing one piece, but I glued it back together the best I could. I thought you'd be happy to have it," I say, and wipe the tear away. "Thank you, Julian. When we get our own house, I'll hang it where everyone can see it," she says, and then she stares past the knot of my wet clothes. "What a mess," she says, and then runs her fingers along the inside of the suitcase. I'm starting to get nervous because I know what's coming. "I had to jump into the river from a bridge. That's why my clothes are all wet," I blurt out. "It was higher than the high diving board at the beach, and then I went on a boat." Her hand stops near the corner. "You can tell me all about it later, Julian." She's found the empty compartment. "Where is it?" she asks in a hoarse whisper. "I traded it for... Julian, I trusted you to take care of it. Where is it?" Alcalino and Gordo are hovering over me, shaking their heads. As soon as they came in, they squeezed all the air out of the too small room, and I'm having a hard time catching my breath. "Tomas, he needed the money," I gasp. "He took me in, fixed up an old boat. There were 14 people on a dock in Havana, and he couldn't let them down." I try to get it all out, but still, she's not listening. "I was going to sell it and use the money to get Papi out," she says, and sinks down into the bed. "Now we have nothing." Suddenly, the room has gotten even smaller. "Tomas promised he would get it back." "He promised?" my mother asks, as if I was crazy to give it away on a promise. She hides her face in her hands. "We have nothing. Nada," she cries. All the air and the confidence that had bloomed around my heart starts to leak and wither. But the hard shell, it's still there, still insisting. Tomas risked his life on a leaky boat to go back, I say. He kept his word to them, and he'll keep his word to me, I yell. Alcalino sits down and puts his arm around Mommy. Gordo leans against the wall and shakes his head. I don't know what else to say. The room is quiet except for the echo of my words buzzing like angry bees in my ear. You should let him explain, Alcalino says softly. My mother gets up. You don't understand, she says, and scoops up my clothes and bumps past Alcalino. She stops in the doorway and asks, Well, did they get out? Yes, 6 men, 5 women, and 4 children. My mother stays up washing my clothes so I'll have something to wear for my first day of school. I stay up too, listening to her mumbling and ironing late into the night. If she had seen their grateful faces, heard the nice things they said, she would understand why I did it. In the morning, I wake up to find my mother folding my clean clothes at the foot of the bed. She sets aside my dress pants and shirt. I want you to look good for your first day at school, make friends. I have never set foot in an American school, so I have no way of knowing for sure, but I have a feeling that the clothes she set out are not going to help me fit in. My mother insists that Alcalino and Gordo walk me to the bus stop even though it's at the bottom of the hill and you can see it from the kitchen window. I'm old enough to walk by myself, I say. A boy your age should not be walking alone. I could tell her that I rode buses all over Miami by myself, jumped from a bridge into a river, sold lemonade on a street where everyone was a stranger, but I don't think this is the right time. That'll have to wait. As the yellow bus chugs up the hill, Gordo turns to me with a smirk on his face. Julian, don't be afraid. If anybody bothers you, just let me know, he says. I'm not afraid, I snap back. Little Julian sure looks scared to me, he says in his old sing-song insulting way. I'm just worried about the bird, that's all. You should be worried. You really stuck your foot in it this time, Gordo says as the bus doors creak open. Mommy should have known better than to trust you with it. You don't know what you're talking about, Gordo, I shout and climb into the bus. I stomp past the driver, and I'm halfway down the aisle when I notice that everybody's staring at me like I'm from outer space. The last seat is empty, so I drop my eyes and follow the rubber floor mat to the last row. Gordo is standing right outside my window. I open it, thinking that he wants to apologize. What do you want, I ask. Gordo jams his thumb into his chest. Remember, if anybody gives you any trouble, he yells so that everybody on the bus can hear him. Just let me know. I'll take care of them for you. Great. Now everybody's going to think that I need my brothers to take care of me. I can take care of myself, I say, and then snap the window shut. The schoolyard is brimming with kids running across the wet grass or huddled in bunches around the swings. As I wait for the bus to empty, I see a circle of kids forming by our bus door. I'll be the last one off, so they must be waiting for me. How could they know I was coming? There's nowhere else to go, so I step into the circle. The kids standing around me are wearing jeans, khakis, t-shirts, and sweatshirts. I'm dressed in a green silk shirt, gold linen pants, and two-tone shoes. I was hoping that I could blend in, just disappear into the crowd. But there's no chance of that. They're all looking at me like I'm the parakeet in a flock of sparrows. A stocky boy walks across the empty space toward me. Hello, I say, but he keeps coming until he's standing so close that I can count the freckles on his face. We look at each other. I try to smile, but he's giving me the look. It's the same look in English as it is in Spanish. I should have known that they'd have bullies here, too. He bumps his chest into mine, and right away I know what he wants. I can't fight in my silk shirt. My mother would kill me. It's my first day of school, and I'm supposed to be making friends, not enemies. I lower my head and try to walk past him, but he steps in front of me. He pushes me against the bus, and I feel the anger bubbling up inside of me. I push back hard enough to topple a caballo-sized bully. I follow the boy as he flies backward, trips, and lands on his back. I jump on top of him, pinning his arms down with my knees. The crowd is yelling. The boy is squirming beneath me. I raise my fist, but I notice his freckles are melting into his angry red face, and there's a spark of fear in his eyes. Suddenly, I understand what Angelita was trying to tell me about bullies. They wear the same look because they're all trying to hide the same fear. They're afraid that if they don't push and bully, someone will push and bully them. They have to be that way. That thought suddenly sucks all the anger right out of me. Now I don't feel like fighting. But I'm still sitting on his chest, and the crowd is yelling, rooting for the boy to squash the newcomer parakeet. How can they be angry with me? They don't even know me. I stand up and the crowd closes in. They're shouting insults at the boy because he's letting me get away. I feel bad for him, so I reach down to help him up, but he grabs the sleeve of my green silk shirt instead of my hand. Just then, somebody pulls on my right ear, jerks my head around, and I hear a tearing sound. A gray-haired teacher is wagging her finger at me. My ripped sleeve is lying on the boy's chest like a deflated snake. I twist and wiggle as far away from her as I can without her yanking my ear off, and make a stab for the sleeve. The teacher pulls me back. I yell, "Caramba!" Then she lets go, and I grab my sleeve. "I am Mrs. Johnson," the teacher introduces herself. Then she launches into a lecture about fighting. "Are you listening to me?" she asks. I can understand what she's saying, but I don't answer. I'm trying to slip my arm back into the empty sleeve. Then she shakes me. "Can you hear me?" she asks as I stare up at her strange metal gray eyes. "Do you understand me?" she asks, and looks at me as if I'm a two-legged riddle, a problem that she has to solve. Without waiting for an answer, she hurries me through the crowded hallways. "After we get you settled, I'll send you down to get your hearing tested," she says loud enough for everyone to hear. She leads me into her classroom and then props me up in front of the class. "This is Julianne," she says. I wince when she mispronounces my name. "He's from the tropical island of Cuba." I try to correct her. "My name is Julian," I say, but it's too late. "Julianne is from a tropical island," I hear a boy snicker. Mrs. Johnson pulls down a map of North America that covers the blackboard and points at my tropical island. On this map, it looks like a short hop from the tip of Florida to Havana, a lot shorter than I remember it. "Do you have any questions for your new classmate?" Mrs. Johnson asks the class. A girl with fire-red hair raises her hand, but Mrs. Johnson ignores her, pointing at a sleepy-looking kid in the back of the room instead. "Oscar? Did you live in a treehouse like Tarzan?" he asks, and the class laughs. "Did you have a TV? Where did they put the antenna? Did you eat off plates?" The questions tumble out of the laughing class, each one sillier than the last, and I stare at my two-tone shoes. The red-haired girl still has her hand up, but now she's waving it back and forth like she's washing a big window. "Yes, Darlene, do you have a question?" Mrs. Johnson asks and then warns, "Just one, Darlene." "My mother read in the paper that parents were sending their children out of your country all alone. Is that how you came?" Darlene asks and calmly arranges her braids. "My mother said that she would never, ever send me away like that, all alone to a strange place, even if it was the United States of America. I mean, why didn't they just buy a ticket and leave with you? Didn't you miss them? And who took care of you?" If I could talk, I would tell her that I had asked myself the same questions over and over again. Then I would tell the class that we have houses, cars, and televisions just like they do here, and that we watched Tarzan movies in a brand new theater that had the coldest air conditioning in all of Havana. I would even love to tell them about the camp, caballo, and the trip on Tomas's boat. But I feel naked standing up here with just one sleeve, and I'm afraid if I open my mouth, the words won't line up, and then they'll really laugh at me. "I mean, how bad could it be that they would?" The girl continues. "Darlene," Mrs. Johnson shouts, "I said one question." Then Mrs. Johnson takes me to my seat in the back of the room. I open the desk and stick my head inside as if I'm looking for something. It smells like old milk in here, but it feels good to be out of sight, even if it is just for a second. I try to follow what Mrs. Johnson is saying, but the words I don't understand start to pile up. From the last seat of the last row, all I can see is the back of everyone's heads. It looks like they're walking away from me, moving ahead, but I'm stuck behind a pile of words that I can't climb over. I'm getting left behind, and I can't tell them to stop. I don't belong here, and I guess it doesn't matter. I never felt this way when I was on Tomas's boat. There I made a difference. He told me so. It mattered that I was there. I rummage through the desk and find a stack of white paper and colored pencils. I'm never lost when I draw, so I start a picture of our house with a television antenna on the roof, our car in the driveway. The next one is of the man with the beard pointing his cigar, dictating. Then a golden swallow with ruby wings flying over Tomas in his boat with 15 grateful people waving and smiling on the deck. I draw one picture after the other until I run out of paper. When I look up, Mrs. Johnson is busy writing math problems on the blackboard. I follow along for a little while, happy to see that the math is the same in English as it is in Spanish, but it doesn't take long to get bored. We did the same problems last year. I gaze out the window at the strange red trees and discover that they're not always red. They're turning red. The trees in Cuba would never turn red for no reason at all. I could ask Mrs. Johnson why, but I think she's forgotten all about me. She hasn't called on me or come back here all day. Maybe I've become invisible. Maybe that's good because then she won't notice if I drift off into a daydream. It's easy to turn the red leaves into a blue sea and then to imagine a fishing boat bobbing on the waves. My father, Bebo, and my brothers are all standing around the fighting chair as I work the rod. I can hear the reels singing, my brothers cheering me on. My arms are tired, but I'm not letting go, and I'm about to land the biggest marlin we've ever hooked when I hear a bell ringing off in the distance. A gray calico pattern appears like a transparent screen between the fish and me. When the pattern shifts, the boat, the blue sea, and my brothers all disappear, and Mrs. Johnson is standing over me in her gray calico dress. The class is up and gathering their books, chattering away as they file out of the room. Mrs. Johnson is holding my drawing of Dolores with her meatloaf and a tin can spaceship in orbit behind her. Julian, these drawings, they tell your story? She asks, and then she points at Dolores. And who is this? Dolores, I say, and sit up. Would you tell me about Dolores? Mrs. Johnson asks. I stare into her eyes. Now they're sparkly blue with curiosity. You want me to tell, I ask, surprised to see that she's interested. She's the very first person to ask. No one in my own family has asked. They say they're too busy, but I have a feeling that they're just not interested. After all, how interesting could the story be if it happened to me? Mrs. Johnson sits down on the windowsill next to me. I start by telling her about Dolores, how she met President Kennedy, and her delicious, soon-to-be orbiting meatloaf. Julian, your classmates would love to hear that story, especially since tomorrow is the day they're planning to launch an astronaut into orbit. Tomorrow morning I'll put your drawings up on the board, and you can start telling us about Cuba and how you got here. The children will love hearing about your great adventure. Then Mrs. Johnson smiles and says, Julian, we are glad that you're here. As I walk across the schoolyard, I spot the boy who ripped my shirt standing in front of the door of my bus. His friends, standing by the swings, are watching me as I slow down to try to think of something I can say or do to get on the bus without fighting. Then Darlene, the girl with the red braids, runs up and starts walking next to me. Watch, she says as we get near the bus. Darlene gets right in the boy's face and snarls, You have to move. She's one head bigger than him, and by the tone of her voice, I can tell she's not going to back away. I think the boy knows that too. This has nothing to do with you, Darlene, the boy warns as he shifts nervously from one foot to the other. This has nothing to do with him either, Darlene snaps back. You don't even know him well enough to like or dislike him. When the boy hesitates, I step forward and thrust my hand out. First he looks back at his friends and then at me, and surprise, he shakes my hand. I'm Julian. I know, he says as I pump his hand. I'm Chuck, he mumbles, pulls his hand back, and then walks away. "You're home free for today," Darlene says, and pushes me into the bus. "Get in there before his big brother shows up." "Big brother?" Darlene laughs. "Don't worry. I'll show you how to get around him tomorrow." She flashes me a sly smile and says, "Julian, you're not alone here." On the way home, I'm thinking about Mrs. Johnson's blue eyes, Darlene's sly smile, and what she said. And I'm not too worried about meeting the older brother. He couldn't be worse than Caballo. At the bus stop, Gordo takes one look at my sleeveless shirt and dirty pants and laughs. "Looks like you lost," he says. "What's his name?" "I didn't lose, and I can take care of myself." When I get home, my mother is sitting at the kitchen table with a small cardboard box in front of her. She hands me the box and doesn't ask about my clothes. "This came special delivery for you," she says. I recognize the neatly printed address immediately. It's from Tomas. I carefully pull off the tape, then lift out a folded Pirate Angel placemat. The golden swallow with ruby wings is sleeping peacefully on a bed of shredded newspaper. "It's here," I yell, and wave it around for all to see. Then I hand it to my mother. The instant her finger touches it, the icy, bitter expression on her face starts to melt, and I could almost see the old sweetness in her eyes. "Julian, I'm sorry I doubted you. It's been so hard. First to lose you and your brothers, and now your father." My mother lowers her head. When I hug her, I hear something rising from deep down in her chest. Her sobs sound like little waves breaking and then breathing back to sea. We all crowd around the small kitchen table to hear my mother read the letter from Tomas. The two families listen quietly as my mother reads about the stolen compass, the trip in a leaky boat with a fickle old engine, and how we snuck into Havana Harbor. When she gets to the part about how I kept the old engine going with tape and a paperclip, Gordo and Alcalino both raise their eyebrows and look at me as if she's talking about a different Julian. Without Julian and that little bird, 15 people would not have been reunited with their families. You will always be welcome in my home. Someday, over dinner and a cold glass of Tomasade, I would love to hear about your trip. When she finishes, she puts down the letter and starts clapping slowly. My Aunt Marta and my Uncle Jose stand up, then my little cousins join in. When Alcalino and Gordo finally get up, they clap a couple of times like their arms were really tired, and then sit back down. My mother puts her arms around me. "Julian, you did the right thing. Tonight you can start telling me the whole story. Tomorrow I'm going to sell this little bird, and we'll have enough money to get Papi out. Then our family will be together again." We all raise our glasses, cups, and flan dishes, anything we can click together. "To our new home," Aunt Marta says. "Where anything is possible," my mother adds. It's a school night, but we stay up talking and joking like we used to. And by the time we finally get to bed, the sad dark cloud that hung over our heads is in tatters. I can feel it blowing away. For the second day of school, I'm dressed like a normal person. I let Alcalino and Gordo walk ahead of me on the way to the bus stop. The little transistor radio they bought is pressed in between their heads. They look like Siamese twins, joined at the ear. Suddenly, Gordo jerks his head back and yells, "Apollo is in orbit!" Alcalino points at the sky. "The astronaut! He's up there in a tin can!" He's shouting, but I can barely hear him. Bulldozers are gobbling up the green pastures on either side of the busy road, turning them into little patches of lawn. Just then, a dump truck growls by, and my brothers disappear into a cloud of dust. There's a whole tree, leaves, roots, and all, in the back of the truck, as if a giant had just yanked it out of the ground. The tips of the roots look like hands waving, waving up at the man in orbit above us. I bet that astronaut is eating Dolores's deluxe meatloaf for lunch. Why not? My mother said that almost anything is possible here. What a place to begin again.
This has been a presentation on